Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Atick, Executive Chairman of ID for Africa, and this is our livecast number 37. I'd like to warmly welcome you to this exceptional episode entirely dedicated to civil registration. The episode consists of 3 segments as follows. We will start with an in-depth examination of the recommendations of the experts group meeting of the 6th Conference of African Ministers responsible for civil registration, the so-called COM6, which took place in October 2022 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We will hear reactions from UNECA, UNICEF, and the elected vice president of the experts group from Cameroon. We will then explore digitalization of CRVS business practices as a key enabler for impactful change. We will examine several available options, including proprietary, homegrown, and open source for eCRVS. Finally, in segment 3, we will get the latest updates from 4 countries on what eCRVS approaches they have adopted. Before we start today's program, I have a few important announcements to make. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for supporting this livecast. Their support enables us to continue to develop quality and timely content for capacity building in identity matters and to make it available as digital public goods on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like, and share. Your engagement helps us significantly expand our outreach. Also, I'd like to call your attention to the World Bank ID4D annual report for 2022, which was published recently. The link to the download is in the chat. One key takeaway from it is that the estimated number of people in the world without ID has now dropped to 850 million, down from the 1 billion reported in 2019. How much of this is due to genuine progress in ID inclusion and how much is due to a change in methodology of counting is not clear. Nevertheless, the reduction is cause for celebration for our global ID4D community. Just keep in mind, prior to the emergence of the worldwide ID4D movement, that number was estimated at 2.5 billion 15 years ago. No matter how you count, progress is being made towards our ultimate goal, identity for all. I look forward to the day when I can stand in front of you and declare that the number of those without proof of ID in the world is now practically 0. Until then, we have enormous amount of work to do. So please mark your calendar for another major livecast coming your way on March 22nd. Livecast 38 will feature an eye on Sierra Leone with a fresh look on a country that has been making headlines, advancing its identity ecosystem and its digital transformation. The episode will also feature several important segments on how digital identity is being used for good in Africa and around the world, especially in improving the well-being of vulnerable people. So please join us. This promises to be another milestone episode just as we enter the final stretch towards the Augmented General Meeting, or AGM, in Nairobi in May. Speaking of the AGM, preparations are proceeding on an accelerated pace. The official government delegations have already been constituted by the ambassadors' offices for the majority of the 48 member countries and validated by the ID for Africa General Secretariat. The concept note for the program had been released earlier, and we expect to open registration on February 15, a week from today. At that time, we will also publish the detailed program. So please stay tuned to all communication channels with ID for Africa so you don't miss any important announcements or deadlines. In the meantime, I'd like to take a few moments to walk you through the structure of this exceptional program. The theme of the event has been shortened to Identity as Digital Public Infrastructure. One key objective of the agenda is to share best practices for advancing identity ecosystems in Africa to the next phase beyond registration and credentialing of unique identities, which have dominated identity developments over the last decade. The dialogue will spotlight policies to enhance user retention and improve the sustainability of ID schemes through enabling priority and high-impact use cases, and is informed by the experiences of a dozen advancing programs on the continent. We will also learn from successful implementations of digital ID from several countries outside Africa who have managed to achieve total coverage of their entire population by creating the right incentives that render their ID systems useful and desirable. While the agenda is responsive to immediate needs, such as identity verification for service delivery, it is also forward-looking and illustrates future pathways for reinvigorating ID4D through the development of public infrastructure, such as the stacks for digital transformation of government and society. Here is the detailed breakdown of the program. It consists of 2 days of multi-segment plenary sessions, PS1 to PS4, and a third full day featuring 4 major workshops. All plenaries this year will be simulcast as livecast direct from the event stage. And we will have 2 additional livecasts in June to summarize the results and recommendations of all the major activities at the physical portion of the AGM. So if you're unable to join us physically, you can stay with us virtually on this channel. In fact, between now and the end of June, there will be 7 livecasts you can join. Let me drill down a little more into the program. On day 1, we'll start with PS1, which consists of a high-level policy panel, a keynote, and a tour of some highly successful identity verification platforms from Africa and beyond. In the afternoon, we will examine the demand side of identity. After analyzing the lessons learned from India's success in digital identity and use cases, the session will focus on the experience of some key sectors that rely on identification systems. Those are primarily the financial sector, including KYC and financial inclusion, health insurance, and social protection. This is identity viewed from the demand side. We will close with an inspiring look at federation, decentralization, interoperability of identity, and trust frameworks, based on how digital identity is developing organically in the USA through the wallet-based state-issued driver's licenses. Lots of lessons here that can be applied in Africa in support of regional and continental identification schemes as required by the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and a topic that is beginning to attract attention from African ICT expert groups being set up by the African Union. Then we will start day 2 with 8 leading identity solution providers who will share in a series of focused presentations, innovations, developments, and lessons learned from their latest real-world deployments. While in the afternoon, we will explore developments with promising impact on identity and digital transformation in the mid and long terms. We will first examine several proven innovations that improve inclusion and user experience, such as mobile apps, facial selfies, and contactless fingerprints, and pre-enrollments. We then investigate building digital public infrastructure, or stacks, as an IT backbone for future-proofing government institutions. Finally, we examine the interplay and the synergies between open standards and open source approaches to collaboration. On day 3, we have 4 major workshops with responsive themes, including a major one on civil registration. That's workshop number 3. I will explain in livecast 38 on March 22nd in detail the objective of each of the 4 workshops, and will share how they will function and how the process for selecting the contributors will work, which we will open in March. So if you plan to attend the AGM, register early so you can be invited in March to propose your candidacy to be a contributor to any one of the workshops. Of course, at the AGM, we will have a very vibrant exposition featuring over 100 leading solution providers and technology innovators from around the world. In addition, this year, we will feature something we have never done before. We will have a CRVS hackathon embedded within a special area of the exposition floor. The hackathon, which is coordinated in collaboration with OpenCRVS, will allow government delegates to experiment with developing their own eCRVS or civil registration solutions on site based on open source, and to link them to ID solutions through open standards. I will say more about the hackathon and about Workshop 3, which deals with a civil registration initiative at the AGM later in this episode. At ID for Africa, we believe the time has come to make a serious push to address the lingering challenge of the children who continue to escape registration. We're convinced the approach cannot be through an isolated event, but will require continuous effort and collaboration among all the stakeholders in our community. We're making this an ongoing commitment, and we intend to use our convening power to reunite the community around a topic that evokes alarm today. In fact, we believe birth registration is not just about registration of newborns and legal identity, very important topics in their own. It is also about enhancing trust in digital identity by connecting it to its roots that define its entitlements. While this does not mean that digital identity ecosystem development needs to start with birth registration, it means that sooner or later, the issue needs to be addressed. At the AGM, we will discuss in more detail this vision, and we'll see why birth registration could be viewed naturally as part and parcel of digital identity. We will argue that governments must focus the role on building trust in identity through formal attestation for 3 factors about individual identity. 1, its living existence. 2, its uniqueness. 3, its origin. Yes, its origin, which can be as important in some contexts as existence and uniqueness. And for that, we need robust civil registration. Said differently, a digital identity without origin, while useful, stops short of conferring full rights and hence remains limited and cannot be foundational. We will revisit this topic at the AGM. We're now ready to start this session. I'd like to welcome, in the order of appearance, Oliver Shinganya, Director, African Center for Statistics, UNECA. Cornelius Williams, Director, Child Protection Program, UNICEF. Alexander Marie Yomo, First Vice President of COM6 and Director General, Bunik, Cameroon. Bhaskar Mishra, CRVS and Legal Identity Specialist, UNICEF. Phui Meng Lo, Chief, Digital Center of Excellence, UNICEF. Rosa Bora, Principal Statistician, Statistics Department, African Development Bank. Anina Wersan, Director, Community Development and Engagement, OpenCRVS. Lamine Fati, Registrar, Births and Deaths, Ministry of Health, the Gambia, who is also the ID for Africa Ambassador. Josephine Mokesha, Director General, National Identification Agency, Rwanda, who is also the ID for Africa Ambassador. Christian Kodia, Director General, Onesi, Côte d'Ivoire, and Ali Larkem, Central Director of Technology, Foresight and Monitoring, Ministry of Interior, Local Government and Regional Planning, Algeria, who's also the ID for Africa Deputy Ambassador. Welcome and thank you to all the panelists for being with us. We truly appreciate your valuable contributions to this livecast and to the cause of identity for all and civil registration. I look forward to engaging with each of you within the different segments. We're now ready to start the first segment. Operator, please prepare the panel. In this first segment, we will have an open discussion with Oliver and Cornelius about the COM6 meeting. And then we will invite Alexander Yomo, the Vice President of the expert group, to add his perspective. So Oliver and Cornelius, once again, thank you for being with us and also for continuing to be strong collaborators of the ID for Africa movement as we continue to go on this journey together. COM6 produced a large set of recommendations since it covered all aspects of CRVS. So focusing just on birth registration, what would you say were the most important recommendations and takeaways from that meeting? We will alternate between the two of you. Let us start with Oliver.
No, thank you very much, and Joseph and those that are connected. First of all, let me just perhaps highlight a couple of things that I consider as key recommendation or issues that we discussed during the COM6 that was held last year in October. First of all, I think there was an issue really to talk about the need to scale up CRVS and launching of mission 100, which is the need for us to be able to ensure that all the babies are registered. What we've noticed over the couple of years since the CRVS started, ministers have made several recommendations for accelerating the civil registration improvement on the continent. And therefore, one of the things that experts were looking at the COM was they made a resolution that they needed to identify the most impactful recommendation that would provide an opportunity to fast track the progress towards some of these achieving the birth as well as death registration. And in particular, now that we're talking about implementing the decade for implementing the SDGs, there is need for governments and to emphasize with governments and partners to reflect a little bit more on the new approaches that could become really what I would call game changers in accelerating the mission 100 that operationalize SDG target 16.9 as well as SDG 17.19. For instance, one of the recommendations that came there, moderator, is that to promote the use of tested, innovative, homegrown and good practice and encourage the adoption of those practices by relevant authorities in other African states. And so with this kind of homegrown innovation, I think they need to be documented, to be shared through a number of sharing platforms, including through South-South cooperation. I think that would be critical. The second aspect, which I think is important, is that some of these innovations, the homegrown ones, require change in the way the governments do things. In other words, the way they design the systems, the use of technology, devices, and therefore it is very critical that governments begin really to increase the resources, but not just resources, but also create a lot of advocacy among the senior government leadership and develop communication messages that are required to ensure there's understanding and awareness for us, for them to be able to increase the participation, but also to ensure that children are actually registered as required. So briefly, that's what would be the issue that we discussed.
Yeah, so let's take one item at a time. So we're going to alternate between you and Cornelius. So obviously encourage the adoption and use and exploitation of tested and well-documented platforms for civil registration and all the other implications that come with that. So Cornelius, what would you say one more takeaway? So we go back and forth between the two of you, one takeaway at a time.
Thank you, Joseph, actually. I mean, I have to build on actually what Oliver has said. Mm-hmm. One important takeaway actually was he spoke about the homegrown solution, but it's a holistic approach that we believe that actually government should have. And as he said, government have to change the way they work. And there were two targeted recommendations. One was the interoperability with the health system, when he's talking about homegrown solution. And the other recommendation actually was the digitization. So both those recommendations have a whole body of work built around it. And actually the conference was able to drill down on some of that and even demonstrate actually to us what could be done actually to implement this.
Okay, so let's stay on this point and try to understand. One of the challenges, or maybe even the dangers and risks in going down the path of homegrown solutions is the sort of leverage and sustainability, is the ability to ensure that these systems are going to be up to date and going to be maintained and going to be. And so typically when you have a community and you have different countries that are making updates and they can share with each other, I have to understand that homegrown should not mean proprietary in the sense that you homegrown it and then you lock it in for yourself and you don't share it. So let's try to elaborate a little bit on this, because there are dangers in going down that path, because let's say a country developed it and then the people who developed it just disappeared. What happens next?
No, if I may, I think first of all, the issue of sustainability is critical. I think when you have a grown product, first of all, is to make sure that this is a robust solution that you are, perhaps suggesting, but also given this platform like this one we have, to be able to share with others beyond just your country, to be share with other colleagues beyond the continent as well, so that they can contribute, perhaps even improve your own solution. And therefore, I think what is really important is that once the solution has been suggested or has been put up there, is being able to cooperate or share it through South-South cooperation, being able to demonstrate its versatility, for instance, how it can be used by others. I think that would be important. You cannot keep solutions to yourself. You have to contribute a lot of knowledge, so to speak, as a country. You cannot, otherwise, you'll be left behind because all sorts of solutions, technology are being provided. And therefore, keeping it to yourself would not help you and may not be as robust as what you may think.
But did the conference explore mechanisms for collaboration? And if it did, what are these mechanisms of collaboration? I'm not talking about information sharing. I'm talking about actual mechanisms by which we can collaborate.
There were several suggestions that were made. And to be honest, one of them is that how do we work, for instance, with ID for Africa to improve some of these solutions? How do we work with other partners that are also providing equally similar solutions that will be able to support countries? So it's a collaborative effort. So at EC, one of the things that we've been able to do is that we have what we call the African core group that support the CRVS. And that core group is a conglomeration of so many other agencies, not just the UN, but even other partners. Some of them are on this platform who come up with different solutions. So we expect that through that platform, they'll be able to learn, to hear much more what's going on in other countries, and to implement or adapt some of those methodologies. So yes, indeed, I think there is need to just go beyond on what you know, but to tap on other knowledge of others that may even have better solutions than what you have.
Cornelius, do you think a pathway where we encourage the development of basically public goods for Africa, or I mean, UNICEF chairs the Digital Public Good Alliance, is that a direction that UNICEF sees as a viable direction for collaboration on the issue of CRVS?
Yes, actually, we see that as a solution, actually, or the direction or the pathway, right? And as we have said before, okay, for us to produce these public goods, and if they're a homegrown solution, that doesn't mean, as you have said, one country just doing its own thing. It means actually collaboration, and actually collaboration between countries, collaboration in like a community working together to deliver these goods and to deliver these practices. So in trying to get this homegrown solution, which we have seen some countries, and I'm sure we're going to hear from some of the countries, have tested out, how can they bring other countries to share this, right? We have seen, again, how countries have shared their expertise in other areas of civil registration. So this is, again, getting all hands on deck, getting all the different technical expertise, and getting everybody to work together.
And I think among our organizations, we've talked about the idea of trying to develop a shared asset that would be essentially a tool around which all of the countries can collaborate, can contribute, can govern, can do whatever they need to do. I'm very pleased to hear that COM6 recognizes the importance of collaboration among the organizations. And as you know, you are co-chairing a session on a workshop which attempts to create the institutional arrangement and the governance for this type of shared asset in whatever form it may take. It could be basically whatever, homegrown or open source or whatever. But at the end of the day, I feel redundant efforts may be wasteful. We need to align and synchronize even standards for what we mean by registration of identity, etc. And so it's very important. The time is now to get to that level of collaboration. So I'm glad that issue is happening. If you like to react before I move to the next topic.
Yes, to quickly react, actually, one of the things we're now talking about is solutions that can be replicated across countries, right? Solutions that other countries can collaborate to. We are convinced that Africa has the talent that can be able to come together to produce joint assets that can be shared and tailored to the legal frameworks of these different countries, to the policies of these different countries. And again, as Oliver has said, to make it sustainable. So we have to not only look at the asset, but the policy, the legislation that surrounds it, the budget that surrounds it.
Okay. So,
if I may add, in terms of this homegrown solution, and maybe even by example, because I see some of them being connected here. For instance, in Rwanda, if you talk about digitalization, they have been able to develop and implement their own homegrown CRVS digital solutions, which provide really great examples of what can be achieved on the continent. And I think what we've seen in Rwanda, that's something that could be taken elsewhere. On vital statistics, a good example would be, for instance, Namibia. They've been able to establish, an MOU between the CR authorities and statistics authorities to be able to produce the vital statistics reports. And many other countries, Rwanda, Kenya, and South Africa, are more or less doing the similar things. In some cases where you've seen that perhaps lending or rather giving the ton of power of attorney to another agency to be able to take certain responsibilities. These are homegrown solutions because that's what works for them. And we see really these things being embraced by many other countries. And I hope that those that are here, they'll be able to share in their own experiences in terms of what is actually happening in their countries.
Yeah, and we're going to see that in a little bit later. One thing that seems to be emerging, and we seem to be referring to this term more and more often, it's the twinning with the health sector. Do you care to comment on that? And then I'll come back and explore it further.
On the twinning of the health sector, in particular, maybe to just focus one or two kind of very specific. I think the issue of registering the birth and death becomes very critical. And I think it's important to begin to recognize the health sector as very critical in this aspect, because they are doing both of those. Rather, they experience both events, birth as well as deaths. And therefore, I think this is an area that we need to explore and really put a little bit more emphasis. I don't think we are doing as much as one would have required, and this is why perhaps we are seeing not many registrations taking place in either of the events. And I think working very closely with the Ministry of Health becomes very important. What we are doing as a core group, EC and working with the core group, is to see how we can get more participation of the actors from the health sector. We are hoping that with time we will see ministers of health coming to the Conference of Ministers on Civil Registrations, including with the ministers that are responsible for CR. So it's a critical area. That's something that we need to work towards to ensure that these aspects are actually taken care of as much as possible to make sure that we have the right records that reflect the real situation on the ground.
Cornelius, what is the blocking with the ministries of health? Is it that they don't feel mandated? Is it they don't have the resources? What needs to change in order to make sure that health and civil registration become integrated so closely?
So in fact, actually, Joseph, thanks for that question, because about 2 weeks ago, I was just in Nigeria, and I sat with my colleagues, took me to the public primary healthcare agency, and they were very clear. They have done the task analysis of what it takes to do the registration. They have tested it out with immunization, and they know how long it takes, how many person hours, how many staff, etc. They know that actually they have to make it sustainable by taking it into the health facility. Now, to get into the health facility, it's the Ministry of Health in most countries are ready to do it. One, they're asking, don't overburden us. We already have a burden. So you have to do that practical analysis of what it takes to do it. What tools can we use? And this is where digitization comes in, and building on their own system, their health information system. So we turn it to a one-stop shop. The second issue is intergovernmental relationship. It has budgetary implication. Who has the budget and who controls the budget for that activity? Will the civil registers suffer a budget cut? We have to take into consideration all those things. Then what are the MOUs, actually, as Oliver mentioned, like Namibia has done? What are the mandates? How do you change that legal framework? The ministries of health recognize the importance of birth registration, but it has to be done in a systemic way that recognize the governance structure, that recognize the budgets, the workforce, the training of the workforce, and the tools.
Are we mature enough in this field to build a template, institutional and governance template for that twinning to be successful? Do you feel it's been enough experiences in different countries that at this stage we know what will work?
I'm confident that we have enough experience because I've seen it, like Oliver was mentioning Namibia, I've seen it work in Namibia. So we have proven concept, okay? I've seen it work in a different system, like the civil law system in a place like Senegal and Ivory Coast. We have seen what can be done, and I'm sure we're going to hear about it. So I believe we now have enough evidence to build that template.
I think we need to be actually promoting that template to make sure that everybody's aware of it. At the AGM in the workshop, I think that would be a good output to basically put it in a place where people can share. Now, hold on one second. If anyone would like to ask questions, please put the questions in the Q&A and indicate your preference for on or off camera, so I could look at them and see if we can bring you on. I wanted to continue this concept of who benefits from civil registration for a second. There is synergy between health and civil registration, but what about elections? Are the electoral bodies, they would love to have accurate data from civil registration. Is there a potential for them to be a stakeholder, not to do the registration necessarily, but to maybe support some of the civil registration since they're the beneficiary? Have you seen that anywhere? So we talked about twinning in health. Do you see any role for commissions, electoral commissions, to be participating?
First of all, before you even go in terms of the actual bodies that benefit from the civil registration, I think the greatest beneficiary of civil registration are the citizens themselves, the owners of the data. I think that we need to acknowledge that. They are the greatest beneficiaries when the system is well functioning. Now, in terms of the other bodies, elections and others, there's still a little work that needs to be done in countries. First of all, to create interoperability between systems. Because for us to be able to pass this information to another system, it means that you need to have a system or an environment that provides the technology to be able to transfer information to another body and so forth. And that requires also visiting the regulations. Looking at the legislation, that also needs to be reviewed to make sure that you are able to pass that, because in the absence of reviewing the legislations and regulations that are provided, other bodies will begin to complain because the issue of privacy, protection of data and so forth, that needs to be looked into. So I think there's scope going forward to be able to do this, but there's still some work that needs to be done in the background in terms of regulations, legislation, and interoperability, in other words, systems having to talk to each other. But I think the scope for sharing information with the elections, with a clear understanding of the objectives, I think it's there. It's just a matter of time and coming up with the right policies on this.
In fact, one of the themes that is going to emerge in this year's annual general meeting at the ID for Africa is the whole of government approach to all aspects of identity, including civil registration. Because we believe that it's not something that only one organization benefits from. Just like Oliver said, it's the citizen themselves, first and foremost, that they benefit. And therefore, a whole of government approach needs to be brought into this. And a whole of government approach really anchors on the ability to create interoperable information systems, because otherwise each one will be siloed. They don't have the same definition for what they mean by identity and all of that stuff. So interoperability, building of a common stack that allows everybody to participate. So that brings me to another point, which is a lot of people are concerned that as we're digitalizing and as we're moving into this world, the issue of data protection and privacy, is that an issue that should be of concern as we move into digitalization of CRVS? Some critics are saying that in the rush of towards digitalization, we may be forgetting about human rights, and we may have not built in place enough protections. So was the subject of data protection and privacy high on the agenda of the COM6 discussions? Maybe in Cornelius?
Yes, it was actually. It was high, when we spoke about digitalization, one of the things that was very clear that it should be built with the principle of data protection, right? And then Oliver has also spoken about who owns the data, right? So all these principles actually built from the start to make sure that the data is secure. If we have a whole of government system, which you were talking about, where the data is being fed into different systems, the electoral system, the health system, the ID system, we have to ensure that what we are building is sacrosanct to that of data protection.
The challenge with data protection, obviously, is the consent management. So in a way, we have not solved that problem. In transactional authentication, it's clumsy, and we still have a way of doing it. When we look at the government stack, like India stack, you're given a message to say, will you authorize or approve this message? The problem with that, until the citizens, until the people have a way of giving, revoking their consent, it's kind of a challenge. And so Oliver, what kind of protection are we talking about? Are we saying thou shall not use this for other purposes? Or are you asking the citizens for consent on using CRVS data?
I think, first and foremost, I think in my view, one of the things that is lacking really is awareness. And then, we talk about these things being very important, but we don't tell them why they're important. We tell citizens, oh, this data is critical, but we don't tell them why it is important. I think that when people are made aware, the policymakers are made aware, the citizens are made aware of what is important and why they have to provide data of a certain form, the issue of arising around data policy perhaps will be much easier tackled than what it is at the moment. So I think it is very important, and it's a legitimate concern about data protection, because they are not too sure who is going to have access to these things. And part of that not being certain is because they don't even know what we're going to use the data for. So yes. One of the things I really want to say, Joseph, is that perhaps one thing that we need to develop is what is the economic value of civil registration data?
Right.
I think we've not been able to say what it is. All we have claimed is, look, it's very, very important that we have the data, but we have not attached an economic value. So the moment we begin to attach economic value to some of these things, the government policymakers, the researchers, the citizens begin to understand why certain data has to be given, and you have to tell them what areas of the data will actually protect it and how it's going to be used. I think that there's still a long way, but I think these are things that needs to be considered going forward.
Exactly. I think that there might be something constitutional at the level of, for example, a birth event. There are certain aspects of the birth event that you cannot keep confidential. The fact that you came into this world is something that must be declarative, and the rest of society has the right to know. But there are other aspects that must remain under the consent of the parents, and then the consent of the child when they become adult. I mean, that conversation of privacy, data protection in the context of CRVS, I think needs to get to the forefront now, because the concerns of digitalization highlight this even more.
Yeah. If I could come into it, actually, Joseph, actually, is this, you're right to mention the Constitution. This conversation should start immediately the legal framework and regulatory frameworks are being updated. And usually in some countries, when they're doing legal reform, they do have public participation in the conversation around the legal reform. And I've even seen countries that have done reform of child rights law and have children and young people participating in the conversation. So we hope that actually in Africa, because there is going to be a need for virtually most of these countries to do the legal reform. As they do the legal and regulatory reform, they should make central to that legal and regulatory reform that actually the modernization, the digitization of their system should look at who owns the data privacy, the system integrity, the clarity, right, of who owns this data, the data availability, and some of these points that you're raising.
well taken, well noted. We're going to try to move, if we can become more actionable as we work together as a community. I'm trying to move forward in this discussion, but a lot of the comments in the Q&A bring me back to twinning with health. There seems to be a strong sense from the audience that twinning with health is the key to solving an important part of this problem. And so somebody is asking, for example, what are the strategies to secure political will at the highest level for civil registration and health sector twinning? Without this twinning, it would be more difficult to achieve Mission 100. So how do you go higher than the level of the minister and basically explain to the government that health and civil registration must work together? What would you tell a prime minister or a president?
First of all, one opportunity perhaps which is a little bit delayed in terms of delivering it is the ministers' conference itself. The outcome of the experts meeting at the COM6, which was held last year, it's supposed to go and be deliberated with the ministers of responsible civil registration, including the ministers of health with whom we had invited this time around. Now, the outcome of that will actually go to the heads of states, which is an event that's held by the heads of states themselves. So I think that once a pronunciation is made by heads of states and agreement that this is the way to go, then the governments have a responsibility at that higher level as heads of state that this is something that needs to be done and that civil registration is important and registration of births are important if at all we have to make a difference on the continent, particularly that we are going towards the Agenda 2030 completion. So I think the opportunity that we have is the meeting that is being planned now, either towards the end of this year or beginning of next year, for the ministers themselves to come together and pronounce themselves on several recommendations that were made by the experts last year. And I think this is a must to get the heads of states and governments to endorse and chart a pathway in terms of how this thing is going to be achieved.
Let me use this opportunity to tell the community that we intend, when we come back in the fall, when the livecast season resumes in the fall, we're dedicating one complete livecast to the topic of sort of digital health and the twinning and sort of how do they help each other, the twin synergies between health sector and civil registration and how they can help each other, because health does benefit from identity and identity does benefit from health. And there are examples like in Cameroon and other countries in as we will see down today in the Gambia and others, health was an important driver, and there are agreements that have been established between the two sectors bilaterally to work together. So we want to learn from those. I just want to let everybody know, yes, I hear you. We don't have time to cover all the variants right now, but we are going to come back to this topic of twinning when we resume after the AGM. And of course, at the AGM, we'll be discussing more strategically. I want to cover another topic because we're running out of time. One is we received a lot of inquiries from people talking about the importance not to forget homeless, stateless and displaced people in the CRVS context. How do you see that working? Usually governments take responsibility for their own people. Let's say you've got refugees and internally displaced people. How do we make sure that that inclusion into the CRVS ecosystem is happening?
Oh, okay. Okay. How is it going to happen in the CRVS ecosystem? I think one of the principles of CRVS undertaking is the universality, that everyone must be counted, irrespective of their condition, irrespective of their situation. And that means that even the people that sit in camps, in refugee camps, also have to be recognized, have to be given that opportunity to be included. And so it's a universal and compulsory that everyone needs to be registered, irrespective of where they are, and the civil registration principles includes for that universality. And this is why we keep on insisting that it has to be a foundation. I do know that there's some contestation around that, but I think it has to be a foundation to make sure that everyone is counted, including those people that are in places where reach to find or reach to go to, people that perhaps coming temporarily. I think what is important is perhaps a discussion of, do we need to make a distinction with somebody that is coming in or not, as a refugee or not? I mean, that's a different conversation. But the underlying principle really that everyone must be able to be part of the civil registration system.
Right, but Cornelius, following up on this, for countries that tell you that we're already having problems registering in the normal context, our civil registration bureaus, etc., let alone being responsible for registering people in the camps that are happening in there, we need support. They would prioritize perhaps supporting their own bureaus. What do you think the international community's responsibility would be in this case? I mean, should the country bear on that responsibility of registering according to this universality, which we agree with? Or do you think there is an international responsibility that has to be used to help these governments deal with this burden?
So definitely there is an international commitment that needs to be made. The UN Legal Identity Agenda has standards that actually cover standard operating procedure that covers vital events for refugees, migrants, and members of displaced stateless population and unregistered population. Already, actually, our colleagues in UNHCR, we're working with them. So if you have a camp situation, if you have a situation where you have a migrant population, similar with IOM, IOM has a new guidelines that they have developed, and they are supporting member states actually to put in place the system. What we're trying to advocate for now is do not create a parallel system.
Yes.
Make your civil registration system inclusive. Right? So we don't have a parallel system. What we have seen in the past, you create a parallel system, you invest in the parallel system, and some of this parallel system are better resourced than your national system. Yes. So we are saying invest in the national system and make it inclusive.
Okay, so you basically believe by assisting the national system, you would actually reinforce the national system and use it in order to register those in the camps. But that's going to require international support for these governments, for sure. And then UNHCR would be sort of the link that helps governments acquire the right platforms for them to continue to do this. So what we're seeing is that civil registration cannot be a standalone. It's gotta be, it integrates everywhere. It integrates with health, with elections, with refugees. It is a whole of government approach to civil registration that must be adopted. In the last few minutes that are remaining, I want to ask both of you, what has changed in your opinion now for you to be optimistic about the future and about our ability to achieve Mission 100, let's say by 2030 or by 2035. But what has changed in your mind? And I want to start with Cornelius, and then I'll give the last word to Olivier.
So what has changed in my mind? I mean, COM6 was exciting, right? I have been part of this journey since the first COM1, okay, a decade ago. The quality of the discussion shows that the civil registers or the officials who are responsible have the required understanding and technical capability. The technical capability is here in Africa. The understanding of what needs to be done and the solutions are clear. Interoperability, digitization, you name it, it's there. We have also looked at the data, and from the trend analysis, we're convinced that there are 20 countries in Africa who can achieve the SDG, who can achieve Mission 100. And we believe that actually if we support the others, they may come closer, if not achieve Mission 100.
Okay, so this is a very positive statement. 20 countries at least will reach 2030 SDG 16.9. Oliver, What
has changed? I think several things. First of all, even being here, being able to collaborate with ID for Africa 10 years ago was practically something that was not heard of. Yeah. But now we are able to sit together. And that in itself shows that we are beginning to converge. We are beginning to go in a certain direction that is acceptable, that requires for us to move the needle. But what else have we seen in the countries? I think what we have seen is a better design of the frameworks at country level. We've seen the commitment from the governments in several of these institutions, as we'll be hearing today. We have seen commitment from development partners willing really to put in their first foot to support countries. Several years, this was not the case. You just mentioned here that today we're talking about 850,000, rather million people. That shows itself that things are happening, and these things are happening because there's a collaborative effort that is going on with the partners, commitment, change of legislation, reviews of their policies. They realize this is an important agenda that needs to be taken. So those are, I think, key things that I see as really changes that we have seen in the last 5 years or so.
And this is only the beginning. I think collaborations between the partners are going to continue. We are looking forward to having all of our partner organizations, UNECA and UNICEF, at the AGM at ID for Africa, and working in the workshops to try to create an African movement, to try to make sure that the matters of governance and institutional and sharing of information will be driven by the continent itself. And we want to facilitate that. And of course, your collaboration has been very, very precious, and we're starting to see fruit. So I thank you for that. I will release both of you with the sincere acknowledgement of thanks. And then I'd like to invite Mr. Alexander Yomo, the DG of UNIC, who is the civil registration body of Cameroon, and the first vice president of the COM6, to share with us his perspective on the COM6 outputs. His declaration will be in French and will provide simultaneous translation. So for English speakers, please switch to the English translation channel if you're watching, the English translation channel if you're watching live. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will find the English translated script in the description down below of this episode. Now we're ready to bring Mr. Yomo. Mr. Yomo, bienvenue dans cet épisode. Nous sommes ravis de vous avoir parmi nous. S'il vous plaît, le forum est à vous.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Joseph Atick. Monsieur le Président directeur général du mouvement ID for Africa, Monsieur le directeur du Centre africain pour la statistique, Monsieur le directeur du programme de protection de l'enfance au Fonds des Nations Unies pour l'enfance, Mesdames et Messieurs les experts et praticiens finalistes, chers collègues, experts des systèmes d'identité et d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et de production des statistiques d'état civil, distingués participants à ce livecast. Mesdames et messieurs, je voudrais d'emblée remercier très sincèrement le docteur Joseph Atick, président directeur général du mouvement ID for Africa, pour l'honneur et le privilège qu'il m'a fait en m'invitant à intervenir au cours de ce livecast portant sur les problématiques liées à l'examen des accélérateurs pour l'agenda 2030 en général et particulièrement sur les recommandations des travaux des experts de la 6e conférence des ministres africains responsables de l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil, COM6, qui s'est tenue à Addis Abeba du 24 au 28 octobre 2022, destinée aux changements à apporter par les pays africains pour atteindre l'ODD 16.9. Pour ce faire, mon propos va s'articuler autour de 3 principaux points, à savoir 1. La réaction aux recommandations et aux résultats des travaux du COM6. 2. Les suggestions en vue de la mise en œuvre des recommandations de la COM6. Et 3. Le Cameroun et l'atteinte des objectifs du développement durable d'ici 2030. S'agissant de la réaction aux recommandations et aux résultats du COM6, je voudrais tout d'abord rappeler que la 6e conférence des ministres africains responsables de l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil s'est tenue sous le thème « Une décennie après le lancement du programme africain d'amélioration accélérée des systèmes d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et d'établissement des statistiques d'état civil, réfléchir sur les progrès accomplis et accélérer les efforts à l'horizon 2030 par la transformation des systèmes. Au cours des travaux, les experts se sont penchés sur les progrès accomplis dans le développement des systèmes d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil pendant les 10 dernières années. Ils ont également débattu sur les événements nouveaux et émergents, ainsi que sur les défis connexes, notamment la pandémie de la COVID-19 et d'autres crises humanitaires, pour, en fin de compte, formuler des recommandations. Au demeurant, il y a lieu de relever que des progrès considérables ont été enregistrés au niveau des pays. En effet, d'importants projets nationaux ont pris corps, axés, entre autres, sur le leadership des pays, l'amélioration des cadres juridiques, la couverture de l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil, la coordination entre les parties prenantes, la numérisation, l'interopérabilité des parties prenantes de l'écosystème de l'état civil, la sensibilisation des populations sur l'importance de l'enregistrement à l'état civil. Malgré ces efforts, il est constant de constater que l'Afrique continue d'afficher les plus bas taux d'enfants enregistrés au monde, avec près d'un enfant de moins de 5 ans sur 2 vivant sans identité légale. La pandémie de la COVID-19 a aggravé la situation en impactant sur le fonctionnement des services d'état civil, menaçant ainsi les progrès réalisés et les points gagnés ces dernières années dans ce domaine. Aussi, il s'est avéré nécessaire, en guise de recommandation, d'identifier des actions stratégiques prioritaires qui accéléreront les progrès des systèmes d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et la production des statistiques d'état civil en Afrique au cours des 8 prochaines années pour atteindre respectivement 100% et 80% d'enregistrement des naissances et des décès, conformément au programme de développement durable d'ici 2030. Pour ce qui est des suggestions en vue de la mise en œuvre des recommandations de la COM6, je me dois de relever qu'au terme des travaux de la 6e conférence, les experts ont formulé les principales recommandations suivantes. la révision et la mise à jour des cadres juridiques afin d'optimiser l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil, l'intégration du programme des Nations Unies sur l'identité légale pour tous dans les cadres existants, la préservation de l'accès aux services d'enregistrement de base pendant les situations d'urgence, y compris pour les groupes de populations déplacées pour assurer la protection des droits de l'homme et l'édification effective de l'État et la bonne gouvernance. La coordination de l'interaction des parties prenantes, y compris les ONG, le renforcement de l'interopérabilité au sein de l'écosystème de l'État civil, y compris les secteurs de la santé et de l'identité. Le renforcement des activités de sensibilisation sur l'importance de l'enregistrement de faits d'état civil au niveau national et communautaire. La numérisation complète des systèmes d'enregistrement de l'état civil pour permettre la production de statistiques fiables. L'engagement à faire de l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil un service essentiel en temps de situations d'urgence, y compris celle de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Le renforcement de l'engagement des États à mettre les ressources financières à disposition, la réalisation d'une cartographie des ressources et l'élaboration des stratégies de financement durable. Aussi, pour mettre en œuvre ces principales recommandations, il me semble judicieux d'actionner les leviers suivants. 1. La promotion du leadership des États et le plaidoyer budgétaire pour des systèmes durables d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et de production des statistiques de l'état civil. Un leadership politique fort et un financement gouvernemental adéquat et permanent sont nécessaires pour garantir un système d'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et de production des statistiques d'état civil robuste, continu et durable. 2. Le renforcement du mécanisme de coordination nationale. Il est nécessaire que les pays mettent en place des comités de coordination interinstitutionnels permanents et composés de toutes les parties prenantes de l'état civil qui se réunissent régulièrement pour échanger sur des questions affectant le fonctionnement optimal des systèmes d'état civil. En ce qui concerne le Cameroun et l'atteinte des objectifs du développement durable d'ici 2030, comme tous les autres pays africains, le Cameroun est engagé dans l'objectif mondial de ne laisser personne de côté d'ici 2030. À cet égard, le gouvernement de la République du Cameroun conduit une réforme en profondeur de son système d'état civil, prenant en compte les principes du programme africain d'amélioration accélérée de l'enregistrement et de la production des statistiques de faits d'état civil, eCRVS. Ainsi, le Bureau national de l'état civil, le BUNEC, le bras technique du gouvernement en matière d'état civil, assure la mise en œuvre des activités de la réforme, principalement orientées sur le leadership pays, la sensibilisation de la population, la mobilisation différenciée des acteurs de l'état civil, l'interopérabilité avec les autres systèmes et la coordination du système CRVS ID. Ces efforts du Bureau national de l'état civil ont d'ailleurs été reconnus par la communauté internationale à travers la sélection du Cameroun parmi 14 pays africains devant conduire le programme pilote des Nations Unies sur l'identité légale. Ces efforts sont néanmoins enclavés par les difficultés suivantes. 1. La nécessité de la mobilisation de ressources financières adéquates en dépit du plaidoyer budgétaire engagé. 2. Les difficultés liées à l'informatisation intégrale du système d'état civil en vue de la constitution et de la gestion d'un fichier national d'état civil complet. 3. Les difficultés de garantir la continuité des activités de l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil pendant les situations d'urgence, y compris la pandémie de la COVID-19. Au demeurant, je voudrais indiquer qu'avec la volonté politique affichée actuellement par le gouvernement camerounais à poursuivre les efforts de consolidation de son système d'état civil et l'accompagnement des partenaires techniques et financiers, au rang desquels ID4Africa, la Commission économique pour l'Afrique, le groupe régional de base sur l'enregistrement des faits d'état civil et de l'établissement des statistiques de l'état civil. Le Cameroun semble être sur la bonne voie de l'atteinte de l'ODD 16.9 d'ici 2030. En tout état de cause, il est souhaitable que le programme de mentorat sus-évoqué, prévu dans 14 pays d'Afrique, y compris le Cameroun, soit effectivement mis en œuvre pour soutenir les efforts de ces pays et permettre l'enregistrement universel des faits d'état civil. Pour terminer mon propos, je voudrais une fois de plus réitérer ma gratitude au président directeur général de ID4Africa et à sa dynamique équipe pour le soutien et l'appui reçus par le Cameroun au cours des différentes assemblées générales du mouvement éponyme en matière de renforcement des capacités stratégiques sur la transformation numérique ainsi que sur la prise de décisions cohérentes dans ce domaine. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Directeur général Yomo, je vous remercie pour votre aimable participation et pour vos commentaires réfléchis et intéressants. Vous avez soulevé beaucoup de points importants pour nous d'explorer et j'ai hâte de vous voir à Nairobi et continuer cette discussion en mai. Merci beaucoup.
Merci infiniment, docteur. Merci.
Merci. Operator, segment 2. Let me say in starting segment 2, we have received an overwhelming number of inquiries and questions about sustainable models and solutions for digitalization of CRVS or eCRVS. The community is thirsty for information about what is available and what assistance they can expect from the international organizations in terms of availability of knowledge. This is the objective of this segment. We will start with a very short presentation from Bhaskar to motivate eCRBS, followed by a presentation from Freemong Lo to talk about what UNICEF is doing to help governments assess their various options. We will take any questions, if there are any, after the completion of the presentations. Welcome, Bhaskar and Freemong.
So thanks, Joseph. Let me go straight to the presentation. And I hope my presentation will also provide some solutions to the issues that were discussed in session number 1. Next slide, please. So digitalization enables civil registration services across the continuum of services, starting with pre-birth interactions for demand creation, including awareness, notification and declaration, validation, registration and certification, and post-registration activities such as a request for additional copies of certificates, informing the civil registrar about any mistakes, and request corrections and amendments, etc. So a whole lot of things can be done using digitalization to the advantage of everyone. Over the years, we have seen the role digitalization has played in improving access to registration services, making civil registration systems more efficient, improving data management processes, and faster transfer and retrieval of records, and so on. However, digitalization also brings some concerns that we also heard in the first session, and therefore requires some protection measures to derive its full potential and advantages. Through this presentation, I will try to unpack 3 key elements of digitalization: innovation, cost, and how safe the processes are and should be from a practitioner's perspective. Next slide, please. The success of digitalization critically depends on well thought out civil registration business processes. So getting the civil registration business process right is the key. This should be the starting point and a non-negotiable priority. Validate and revalidate CRVS business processes with concerned actors to derive the maximum out of this process. Post-digitalizing course corrections are not only prohibitively expensive, but seldom work. There is a serious risk of taking a CRVS system back by several years, if not decades. We do have some such instances even from Africa. 2 deviations that we generally notice during the digitization process are: 1, adding extra steps to civil registration business processes, which is contrary to the objective of simplifying the CRBS system and improving the overall efficiency. 2, additional validation and scrutiny checks at the certification stage. All checks should be completed at the registration stage so that registration and certification are done simultaneously. Our decision on the extent of digitalization must reflect the ground realities and develop solutions that can work in diverse and challenging settings. A practical way forward is to follow a hybrid approach: end-to-end digitalization at district offices and big hospitals, and digitalization at the next level in semi-urban and rural centers. It will also address the concerns of widening the digital divide. Issuing a unique ID number at birth registration is an excellent move to establish a dynamic linkage with the national ID system, and countries are moving in this direction. However, given the challenges of connectivity and other logistical issues, it is important to have options beyond the real-time generation of unique ID numbers. Real-time generation, of course, can be done at headquarters, district offices, and big hospitals. For other centers, mobile phones can be used to send a minimal set of information, such as name of the baby, date of birth, sex, place of birth, parents' details needed to uniquely identify birth using SMS to the central server. In return, a unique ID number can be sent back. Deduplication and exchange of information from the server to the client can be automated to cut down the time. Pre-allotted unique ID numbers can be shared with registration with poor and no connectivity. Asking parents to provide their national ID cards at the time of birth registration of their babies is on the rise, and this poses new sets of challenges for those who do not yet have national ID cards, especially vulnerable and marginalized populations. Accordingly, this has become a serious equity issue in countries with incomplete coverage of national ID registration and has started affecting the pace of birth registration. Countries should therefore follow a gradual approach and begin collecting national ID numbers during routine health services, especially during antenatal services. The health sector should bear the names of those who do not have national IDs with national ID authorities. Such a move will provide expecting mothers and fathers at least 4 to 5 months to get their national IDs, and national ID authorities a bigger time window for follow-ups. The health civil registration national ID pathway, we heard about the integration between civil registration and health. It's extremely critical to creating the stock and maintaining the flow in an organic and most cost-effective manner. However, it requires harmonizing data standards across health, civil registration, and national ID systems to allow a seamless exchange of information by putting civil registration at the center of the ID ecosystem in a country. This is what the United Nations Legal Identity Agenda approach to civil registration, vital statistics, and identity management recommends. This will allow countries to use the routine health sector data for notification or declaration. The details needed to uniquely identify a birth or a death are readily available in the health sector. This will also help remove the requirement of formal notification done very often as part of the civil registration process, and instead parents can use mother and child health cards as proof of birth. So in one go, all institutional events will become eligible for registration. It will also help cut down one extra step in moving towards a one-step, one-widget process. The two main advantages of the health civil registration national ID pathway are to collect information once and use multiple times and move information, not people. Next slide, please. The digitalization process, including authorization of roles and responsibilities, should be mandated by civil registration laws as certificates are legal documents with evidentiary values. The provisions in CR laws should be in perfect harmony with the provision of IT Acts to benefit from the complete canvas of protections and avoid any potential conflict. The process should respect human rights and other rights through data protection, privacy, confidentiality, ethics, and intended and proportionate use of data with no repurposing. These should be the safety pillars. In most countries, CRVS records are not public documents, so measures well aligned with these safety features are critical. There should be clearly defined data sharing protocols, respecting the provisions of CR laws, and hiding personal identifiers when data is shared for compilation of statistical report. Safe digitalization entails data safety measures at all stages. At the data collection stage, whether the data is collected directly using a device or data is entered subsequently, there should be appropriate credentials to allow authorized use. There should be auto-delete data features for lost devices and auto-cleaning for offline devices. Processing, including approvals, should be done by authorized personnel and for earmarked roles only. Trails, including time and date stamps, should be auto-generated. Data should be stored in fully protected devices and have adequate backup mechanisms. Regarding other concomitant measures, there should be a data ownership clause to avoid any intended or unintended data leakage. The Committee on the Rights of the Child also raised this concern in a symposium on legal identity last year. CRVS solutions should be properly audited as per the host department's policy, and several countries have such requirements in place. Finally, there should be a standard operating protocol for device handling, including handing over of devices in case of transfers and retirement, as we rely more on handheld devices. Next slide, please. The overall cost of digitalization is a function of several factors, and necessary financial prudence must be shown at each step. Any investment in IT infrastructure should be guided by the need, cost for maintenance, and cost for replacement. We should desist from disproportionate investment, which donors and partners also very often contribute to. Vendor lock-ins is another concern that we have seen in several countries, and vendors asked for exorbitantly high amounts, even for basic customizations or adding a simple feature. Digitalization efforts should be organically linked to the automation efforts of the health sector. Rather, we should use that as an opportunity. Decentralization of DHIS2 and other health systems will allow automatic transfer of health sector data to CR agencies. This will eliminate the need for data entry by registration officers to a large extent and reduce their workload. Align CRVS digital strategy with national digital framework to allow seamless interoperability across sectors and make CRVS investments cost-effective. This would ease access to public services for citizens and residents. Several countries have used partnership with mobile service providers to get mobile phones, SMS, and internet services free of charge or at discounted rates. Mobile phones have been proven to be a game changer for data capturing and transferring at registration points, especially at sub-district levels. Finally, the cost of digitalization should not be indirectly passed to clients in the form of increased fees for registration and certification, or putting conditions such as buying a minimum set of certificates. The bottom line is that registration should be free and the first copy of certificate should be provided free of charge. This should be part of the renewed social contract anchored in human rights as part of our duties to the future. Let me stop here. and pass on to Fumeng for her presentation. Over to you, Joseph. Thanks.
Thanks, Bhaskar. You've raised a fantastic set of recommendations, and I'm sure we're going to be exploring them in future events. I just want to remind Fumeng that the interpreters have not been able to catch up with Bhaskar. He was going at a very fast pace. I appreciate his interest and time. So, operator, when you're ready, please put up the presentation, next one, and I'll just ask Fumeng to slow down a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And greetings from Nairobi to everyone and audience calling from around the world. Really, it's a great opportunity for us from UNICEF perspective to share some of the work that we have done to everyone here. Just building on top of Bhaskar's passionate recommendations around how should we see doing digitalization innovatively, safely, and in a cost-effective way, what I'm going to walk you through in the next few minutes is really the work that in the last 1 year UNICEF has done in doing the landscape analysis, looking at the digital CRVS and eCRVS solutions in the market, and analyze it, looking at some of the details from a technological perspective, the processes, and sharing with you some of the key takeaways. We think that, this is a prominent contribution to the community here that we are talking with, because without using digitalization of CRVS, we could not successfully advance to the next level. Next slide, please. According to the data that we have, there are still 164 million child under 5 remain unregistered globally, and more than half of them, which constitute 91 million, live in Africa. I believe that this is the reason why we are all here, if not a big reason why that we are not here. We have made progress over the years, but we're still not quite there yet. The mission that we have in hand is how do we continuously reduce this number to 0? Next slide, please. And the question that we ask ourselves, I think, since the starting point of this live cast is that where and how might digital and digitalization can play a very important role in reducing that staggering 164 million number and 91 million number in Africa. First and foremost, I think I'm hearing from everyone that has spoken before me that the right to be recognized as a person before the law is a critical step in ensuring protection and all the rights that come with it. It is unspoken, but it is very, very important from a macro environment perspective to recognize that digital has provided transformative improvements in eCRVS system, because only by this we could ensure universal coverage, and we could ensure the standardization and streamlined registration processes and remove away manual and lengthy processes that it should be gone. And only through digital, we could ensure system interoperability, which has been spoken very many times before this, and also provide secure storage. I have to repeat this again and concur with speakers before me that the data interoperability or the interoperability of eCRVS, eCRBS systems with health and ID system, being able to look at them in a holistic level will actually help us to realize these benefits. Next slide, please. Switching gear in diving down into the purpose of my sharing today, which is about the landscape analysis work of eCRVS system. A bit of the background and objective. UNICEF, we have footprint in over 190 countries, and we have been supporting eCRVS solutions or initiatives in more than 70 countries. We recognize that there is no conformative. There is a danger of 1,000 flower bloom situation in the eCRVS systems. And there is a need also to really look at what is out there and what can we say and back as the vetted and trusted eCRVS solution or solutions that can be scaled and implemented across countries that share the same needs. So we took the initiative in Q1 of 2022 to conduct a comprehensive assessment of existing CRVS to identify solutions that could fulfill this need and ready for implementation while complying with UNICEF requirements. In terms of scope, we understand that we could not cover everything, knowing the fact that there are a lot of eCRVS solutions. We focus on the solutions that are available in the market for deployment. However, we were not able to get into the details of looking at homegrown and individual country solutions, because our objective is to look at systems, eCRVS solutions that could actually scale across countries. We also included both open source and proprietary solutions, eCRVS solutions in the analysis, based on the fact that there are some open source solutions, but predominantly the eCRVS solutions are proprietary solutions, that these are licensed software licensed solutions. In our methodical method, our scope also focus on self-reported information provided by the solutions providers, and we cover live demos across 11 use cases. From a timeline perspective, we started the journey in Q1 of last year, and this continues to Q2 of this year. And we won't stop there, and we will not stop there, because as soon as we are done with this, we will also kick off another set of assessment, which I'll detail next. Next slide, please. There are 6 steps that we are taking to evaluate the eCRVS solutions in this landscape analysis. From the approach of understanding the market and understanding what is needed and what's required, prioritization perspective, the first step that we did was do a thorough desk research and solution identifications. We didn't do it by ourselves in New York or Nairobi. We actually work with countries, and in this case, we have consultations with more than 10 countries. And we identified 15 solutions, eCRVS solutions, that we invited to join and participate in this landscape analysis. In the second step, we did a lot of outreach, and we were successful in getting responses from 7 eCRVS solutions providers. They responded to the requirement analysis that we shared. And based on that, we did a thorough analysis on the requirements. We did not stop there, because the approach that we are taking is self-reporting. We thought it is very important to have live demos to validate some of this self-reported information. And we specifically picked 11 use cases for the live demos. 6 solution providers actually participated in the live demo. Step 2 and step 3 was actually quite technical from a digital solutions perspective. This would not entail the entirety of the landscape analysis, because we actually pivot in adopting some of the industrial recommendations, such as the Digital Square Global Goods Maturity Model in step 4 in our maturity analysis for the solutions. So we look at very many elements other than the functional and non-functional requirements. And I will share some more details in the upcoming slides. And with this, 6 solutions provider also provided their response, and we did, and that actually helped us in step 5 to conduct a comprehensive SWOT analysis for each and every responses that we get from the solution providers. And I am glad to announce that with that, we were able to shortlist 4 solution providers in this entire landscape analysis. We are still currently working on a vendor analysis report that entails some of the details that we can share to the general public, and we anticipate to publish it next month. Like I mentioned just now, this landscape analysis only gives us a sliver of what's happening in the eCRVS market in enabling countries to reduce the number of children without identity. The need of having data privacy and security and analyze it on the shortlisted solutions level is very, very strong. So at step 6, which we are just starting, it's about making sure that we have a comprehensive assessment on data privacy and security design and implementation of these solutions for these 4 solutions that we shortlisted. And if everything goes well, we anticipate to have that assessment released by Q4 of this year. Next slide, please. I thought it is important for us to get into a little bit more details of what does it mean when we say step 2, we have the vendors provided their feedback on the requirements. So from digitalization of CRVS perspective, we always remind ourselves that digitalization is not a matter of just replicating what is in the manual process or what is existing. We need to be consistently looking at what can be improved and what can take us to the next level. So that's defined by the functional and non-functional requirements that becomes the capability of the eCRVS solutions. So on the functional requirements perspective, we invite the solution providers to answer questions or to self-rate based on the requirement questions, these categories from alerts to validation to system monitoring. And from non-functional requirements perspective, we also invited them to self-rate them between interoperability, portability, all the way to some very technical things such as security, backup, error handling, and learning. Being a technologist myself, we find this a very important bar that would actually help this community to expand the work that you have in eCRVS. And as a result of that, we will anticipate to also publish this 110 requirements, just the requirements itself that we have put together, because we believe that these requirements would actually form the foundation of the functionalities of the eCRVS solutions as well. Next slide, please. In step 4, we talk about maturity analysis using some of the industrial standard, such as the Digital Square Global Goods Maturity Model. This takes the indicators that we looked at is above and beyond just technology. We look at scalability, country utilization, governance, total cost of ownership, and total cost of ownership here is very, very important. As the speaker from Cameroon has mentioned, one of the key takeaways is that we never have enough money and funding to actually be able to propel and advance the eCRVS solution. So being able to understand what's the cost and how can we efficiently expand and leverage and look at the total cost of ownership in a scalable manner is important. So the list goes on all the way to multilingual support and software roadmap. Next slide, please. We will publish the report about the eCRVS vendor analysis, hopefully next month. However, we do want to share, some of the early learnings and takeaways that we already identified, and I hope this will resonate with the audience here. A few key things is that it is a fragmented market, and we haven't seen so far from our landscape analysis that there is a single winner, and there's really there's no clearly one CRVS solutions that has reached very high adoption rates across a lot of countries. This is a gap, but we also see this as an opportunity because from UNICEF perspective, we also have the vantage point to look at other sectors that have successfully pushed for digital public goods and solutions that could scale massively in both health and education sector. So I think in the ID and CRVS sector, we have a gap, but we have a opportunity as well to consolidate this fragmented market. The total cost of ownership in the analysis that we have seen so far also varied widely. Keep in mind that this data that we got is actually self-reported. So the reported numbers that we got from a total cost of ownership perspective range between $270,000 US to 61.5 million. And we suspect that we weren't able to go in and check every line item because we trust the self-reported information. However, we do suspect that some of these variations was due to some solution providers. They are not really considering all required cost drivers. So on this topic, there's more room to expand and to quote unquote investigate, if not interrogate. And the third one is rather interesting, yet very, very important for this group, which is the online and offline functionality. We found out that 3 of the 7 shortlisted systems or shortlisted vendors that actually share with us their self-reported information cannot comply with offline requirements. Considering in Africa continent, we have to be very mindful that there is digital divide and the gap of digital divide is still very wide. So without offline function in the solutions, it would significantly limit their potentials in applying in low middle income country. So we would want to be in a position to strongly advocate for vendors to actually put this into their solutions. The fourth key takeaways being that the implementation of interoperability or data standards between eCRVS system and other solutions are fairly inconsistent. So again, an area that we need to focus on. Last but not least, the security considerations in this system, such as encryption and decryption for incoming and outgoing data, is not consistent. And the use of global recognized benchmark systems such as CIS is not applied, which is really one of the key reasons why it triggered us to try to advance to the next step, which is doing data privacy and security assessment. Next slide, please. I think I share the sentiment of a lot of speakers before me about what we need to pay attention to in advancing and digitalizing CRVS systems. And being a technologist myself, it is always easy to actually understand it and absorb it from a design principles perspective. There are 6 design principles that we would like to advocate for. Design for interoperability, design for scale, to be able to be flexible and scale above and beyond just one country to many countries. Making use of open API standards and data that could also help us be able to communicate and facilitate information. Address the concern from the users and our target audience by really taking into consideration privacy by design and safeguards during the creation of the solutions. Prioritize security. Last but not least, it's always very important to design a system that users could come along with us. So design with and for the users is very important. I want to, before I wrap up the call, the sharing, I want to take the opportunity to thank ID for Africa for this opportunity for us to share some of the work. I hope the sharing is is resonating with the audience here. And I look forward to working with you on getting to the next step. And thank you for, like, Joseph, like,
thank you.
It's a little bit interesting because when I see you turn on your camera, I was like, okay, time check. So
yes.
Maybe I used 2 minutes.
You
right?
can wrap this up. Yes, you can wrap this up. No worries.
So applying the results, how do we apply the results? From UNICEF perspective, we anticipate to tailor this, to tailor our country support on three elements. One is technical planning, and second is requirement scoping, and third is the assist analysis, looking at what the government already have and what the future would look like. And with that, Joseph, I would like to pass it back to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Actually, if we only have time for one question, actually, we exceeded our time, but in the meantime, stay with me for a second. I just wanted to ask you, while we look if anybody has an urgent, very specific question to you, I wanted to ask you to repeat what you said about publishing this report, and when and how will people be able to get it?
So yes, we are intending to publish the report about the eCRVS landscape analysis next month. And in terms of how people would get it, we would want to actually share it through public channels and through our partners that work very closely with us as well.
Okay.
So I hope in the next sharing session, we could simply provide you a link for you to click on it and download it. Okay,
we'll be happy to do so. Let me ask you, do you expect this to, since this is a dynamic field and that is moving and changing, do you expect this to be an ongoing activity at UNICEF, or this is a one thing and it's done and maybe in the future you'll come back to it? Yeah, so I think from my perspective, I'll invite Bhaskar to chime in from his perspective as well. I think we are onto something really big. And for us, from UNICEF perspective, for us to be able to really reduce the number from 164 million or 91 million in Africa to 0, it is a continuous effort and continuous improvements that we need to focus on. So in essence, this would not be a one-time deal. And with the feedback from everyone here, we anticipate to continue to improve the process and get better. Can you evaluate new ones? Let's say new ones come and they step up to you and say, evaluate me. Will that be a process that you will continually have? We would be open to that opportunity to actually evaluate more. As you can see, this is the first time that we're doing it. And from 15 vendors that we reach out to, we only get 7. Hopefully with better publicity, could actually attract more eCRVS vendors into the fold. Okay. Bhaskar, any last words? We ran out of time.
No, I think this was a great exercise. We were also struggling because too many solutions in the market, and that had become a big headache for us also, and also for countries. So this is a good start, and going forward, certainly we will look at, as you would have noticed, Joseph, things are changing very fast. Like even vendors, they are making a lot of improvements. So the idea is to have a stage where like other players can also come in and join, and then we benefit as a community. Okay, excellent. Exactly. I want to thank both of you. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing both of you in Nairobi, as UNICEF will be co-chairing Workshop 3, so which is essentially continuation of this collaboration to try to assess how do we create a shared asset for civil registration in Africa. So thank you for the collaboration, and we look forward to seeing you. And I'm sure we'll hear more about your progress in this regard. And of course, you can count on us to use our channels to distribute any information that you need. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Joseph. Thank you. Now, I'd like to move on to the next presentation in this segment.
and that will be at the African Development Bank. Let us now welcome Rosa Bora from African Development Bank, who will present actually the results of a different kind of study that's done at the bank. And it's basically the state of eCRVS adoption on the continent. And the issue here is to look at the statistics to see how much digitalization has already taken place, how much remains to be done. So Rosa, thank you. The stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the ID for Africa and Dr. Joseph Atick for having us to share the highlights from our recent assessment on the status of CRVS digitization in Africa. We have presented this in the experts group meeting of the COM that was held in October 2022. So as you know, CRVS digitalization has been on the agenda, both globally and in Africa, and particularly in Africa, it has been a point of discussion in various conference of ministers. And to this effect, the regional CRVS partners, including the African Development Bank, have come up with various guidelines to support countries in this process, notably digitization guidebook and best practice guideline in CRVS digitization. In view of this, the main motivation behind this assessment is to provide information on the status of CRVS digitalization in Africa, and to serve as an input for upcoming strategies, both regional and national level. And also, we wanted to identify digitalization best practices within the continent. And finally, we wanted also to see how those resources that were supported by partners have helped the countries move forward in terms of digitalizing their CRVS systems. So I'll be briefly talking about the objectives, the approach we followed in the assessment, and then present to you summarized observations from the assessment. So I've described the general motivation behind doing this assessment. So I'll go into the specific objectives. Before that, let me start by defining what we mean by digitization or digitalization in this particular assessment. Because, you know, until recently, these terms have been used very interchangeably, but now from emerging definitions, digitization refers to how the data is stored, while digitalization is about the process. So in our case, the definition we adopted, or what we were looking for in this assessment, was increased use of IT systems and the ability to convert paper-based systems into digital form, and generally use of electronic tools to collect, transmit, and store civil registration related information. And the specific objectives of the assessment were to assess the status of civil registration and vital systems with regards to digitalization, and also look at the capacity and potential and opportunities and gaps regarding digitalization of CRVS systems in Africa. Next, please. So coming to our approach to data collection, what we did was we sent electronic survey questionnaires to civil registration offices, and some of them, they assigned a focal person, and in some cases, the DGs of the CR offices themselves have filled the questionnaire. And the questionnaire was fairly small, it took about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. And the questionnaires were shared in 3 languages, English, French, and Portuguese. Next, please. So in terms of scope, these are the areas we've covered. We asked questions related to the legal environment, which is the legal provision for civil registration, as well as the legal provision to link CRVS to other databases. We have, in terms of looking at the level of digitalization, we asked questions related to the databases, whether they are computerized or not. We asked which process within the civil registration is digitalized, and also on data hosting. We have asked questions about the type of IT systems used, and also questions related to existing initiatives that can be a good example, or that can be an input for future design of digitized CRVS system. And finally, we looked at the capacity in terms of human resources, funding, as well as the level of infrastructure. And then we looked at what challenges they face. Next, please. So in terms of coverage, we targeted all African countries, and we were able to send questionnaires to 52 countries, out of which 43 have responded. Next, please. So I'll be highlighting the results majorly in 6 areas. The first one is the legal environment. As you can see, in 97% of, almost 98% of the countries, there is a legal provision for registration of births, deaths, marriage, and divorce, at least. However, when you look at the legal provision for linking and interfacing of the CRVS database with others, the number of countries that said yes, it actually significantly declines. However, it's still around 65%. 65% of the 43 countries said they have legal provisions to link and interface the CRVS database with the other databases. Next, please. The next 4 areas we look at the digitalization process. The first one is how is the database stored? Is it computerized or not? As you can see, in majority of the cases, 32.6% of the countries indicated that they have computerized database at the national level. And in 10 countries, they indicated all civil registration offices countrywide have electronic databases. And as you can see, 4 countries indicated their electronic databases are concentrated in towns, and for some in only major cities. In 16.3% of the countries those are 7 countries, they do not have any electronic database in the country for maintaining civil registration information. Next, please. The second area we looked at is the digitization of processes. Which step is digitized? As you can see, the digitization of registration process for consolidation of data nationally, issuance of certificates, search and data recovery of electronic database, and validation of a registration appears to be more common among the countries that have electronic databases. The least common digitized processes are completion of declaration form and sharing of data with the national statistical offices and other institutions. Next, please. Yeah, the other area we looked at in terms of digitization is the use of information communication technology. The first area is data transmission. In 21 countries, all registration records are transferred electronically from the local offices to regional offices, then onward to central office. As you can see, this is for 49% of the countries. In 11 countries, paper copies are used throughout the system to transfer birds and death records to a central storage facility. And in 6 countries, we've seen that paper copies are sent from local offices to the regional office and then processed there for electronic transmission to central office. In terms of the type of CRVS IT software used, 72% of the countries currently use custom developed software for their CRVS data systems. 4 countries indicated that they use commercial off-the-shelf software, and while the rest, as you can see, the question was not applicable to them. In terms of data hosting, nearly 3/4 of the countries host their own data using local servers within their countries. 6 countries indicated that they use outsourced services to host their civil registration data. In terms of the software capability, as you can see, the figure on the right hand shows the distribution of the countries by the capability of the CRVS software they use. Of the 37 countries that have some form of electronic database, the software in use in 29 countries has the capability to deactivate a user login after several predetermined login attempts, and they have fraud detection. And in 28 countries can detect fraud, and 27 countries have security-enabled features such as user password expiration. And in 25 countries, there is a capability to transfer and store encrypted data, and 22 countries indicated that they have software with dashboards and visualization capabilities. Next, please. Okay, and then we looked at the opportunities and best practices that exist in terms of linkages and interoperability between systems. As you can see on the first diagram, all countries except 6 have electronic and national identification databases, and of the 37 countries that have digitalized national identification systems, 23 have linked it to the CRVS system. In 23 countries, the CRVS database is actually linked to national identification database. In terms of the e-government structures that are in place, 31 countries indicated that they have data centers, and 27 countries indicated they have system integration platforms. However, in terms of cloud computing, it appears to be somewhat a challenge. As you can see, only 16 countries indicated they have access to cloud computing. In terms of system integration, as you can see on the last diagram, 25 countries indicated that they have collaborative arrangements with Ministry of Health. They have signed agreement, and 26 countries have patient-level electronic health record systems. However, although the agreement is there, only there is limited interoperability. Only 6 countries indicated that they have interoperability between the electronic health records and the civil registration systems. Next, please. So we had questions about the challenges they face in terms of when in the process of CRVS digitization, and we have grouped the challenges mainly into 4. The first one is funding, then infrastructure. There are also still gaps in legal provisions when it comes to linking with other databases, and also capacity in terms of human resources. Especially in terms of infrastructure, they have identified unreliable and inconsistent supply of electricity, inadequate office and other physical infrastructure, limited access to internet for transmission of data from the local to the regional office and then to the headquarters. And other challenges also include inadequate equipments such as computers, scanners, and also in most cases they have indicated lack of enough IT personnel. Although here the question we asked was that the civil registration office have dedicated staff members responsible for the management of the IT system. Of course, around 84% of the countries indicated yes. However, because the question was general, somehow this is concentrated in at national level or in the cities and towns. However, when we go down to the subnational and local levels, the challenge related to human resources was also high. Next, please. So coming to the conclusions, what generally the assessment indicated is that there is a gradual digitization or digitalization process of CRVS systems in Africa. And within the process, some of the steps appear to be more digitalized than the others. These are consolidation of data nationally, issuance of certificates, validation of registration, and so on, are more digitalized than the other processes. And the least common digitalized processes are completion of the declaration form and sharing of data with national statistical offices and other institutions, still showing gap in linking and interoperability between different databases. Most countries have electronic databases for storing and maintaining vital event records, also at various levels. As we have seen earlier, in about 10 countries, electronic databases are present throughout the country. However, if we take into account databases at national level or and at regional and cities or town levels, actually the number of countries who have such databases increases. We have seen there are scalable initiatives for interoperability and integration of system or databases. We have also seen that there are best practice of digitalization within the continent, not only based on this assessment. We have seen countries presenting their best practices on the experts group meeting that was mentioned at the beginning, and also I'm sure there are countries which are here to present their best practices. So this is to conclude that there are best practices within the continent. So the next step, which is expected from us and all the partners, is actually to document these best practices in order to make them available to the other countries which want to pursue this journey. And finally, there are still gaps in terms of resources, capacity, and human resources, including and also funding. And we have also seen a lot of countries have interest in improving their CRVS system, and they are working on that. And this, I'd like to thank you again, and sorry about the technical issue.
Excellent. No worries, Rosa. You've got a really, really fascinating amount of data that, in fact, if we can drill deeper and deeper, we can learn a lot more, even more. For example, it would be fascinating to understand in an extension of your survey how and what is the nature of the linkage between the civil registration and the ID, because it could be simply a push, it could be a pull, or it could be simply access. Are they really sharing data in the sense of automatically updating when one is updated and back and forth? If you can begin to address some of these questions, that would be an incredible contribution to the state of knowledge. But you're really on the right track. I'll say congratulations on that study. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I will ask anybody that has any questions to put them online for you, and then if you don't mind answering them as they come in. Okay?
Okay.
We'll look forward to seeing you again, and hopefully we'll see you at the AGM in Nairobi. Thank you so much. Thank you. Before we get into the last part of this segment, I'd like to make a special announcement. As I had mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, there will be a CR hackathon at the AGM this year based on the open source OpenCRVS. Let me say a few words about that. Up to 3 countries will receive special assistance and will be accompanied to create working OpenCRVS instances, which they will be able to showcase at the AGM. I'm pleased to have with us today Anina Wersan from OpenCRVS to talk to us about this opportunity. Anina, operator, can you bring Anina? Anina, welcome. Let me start by asking you why having a working OpenCRVS instance could help countries with their long-term strategic plans.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Joseph. It's always a delight to be part of these live casts. This is such an exciting opportunity, and the reason for that is what countries can learn from seeing something real and putting it into the hands of users. The difference between abstractly knowing what you need in a digital civil registration solution versus seeing it in action, how it fulfills your business needs and how users interact with it are often 2 very different things. So configuring an instance of OpenCRVS will allow countries to do a number of different things. It will allow them to explore different service delivery models, such as empowering trusted agents to declare vital events at the community level. Users can test that really important online-offline mode that was previously mentioned and see how it works in practice. Countries can also see how digital services starting in health facilities, another prominent topic of discussion today, works in reality. You know, the theory is there, but what does service delivery look like? Management team can see real-time data on their own devices. They can see how that data can inform practical service improvements and interventions. And all these things that I've just mentioned can make a huge difference to completeness rates and can also, really importantly, inform the necessary investment required to achieve them. Ultimately, configuring an instance of OpenCRVS is going to give civil registration management the empirical evidence that can be used to attract the necessary investment for long-term CRVS digitization. It can be done quickly, and it can result in an investment case for scale. And by the sounds of things in the discussions today, that's really critical at this point in time.
Yeah, exactly. So let us remind the audience how the process leading to the hackathon will work. I mean, what's going to happen next? We opened up the call. We're asking any country to submit, to contact ID for Africa if they're interested in participating. Walk us through the steps, Anina.
Absolutely. So you're going to reach out to ID for Africa, at which point you'll be sent an application form asking some specific questions, because we really want to work with countries who are invested in making this process a success. Part of making that process a success is making sure that there are available human resources to support the efforts. Now, this isn't a full-time effort, but it's really important to have the right people involved to be successful. Apologies, I think that's my power going out. So who are these people that we need? We need a project sponsor, a senior level representative from the Civil Registration Authority, who's going to champion the process and represent the outcome and the learnings at the ID for Africa AGM. We need a focal person, someone who's going to be the point person for the configuration and the testing process. They'll manage the day-to-day activities involved in understanding the requirements, logistical arrangements, and so on and so forth. We need someone who really understands civil registration in the country, a business analyst of sorts, so someone who can gather all the inputs required for configuration, ask questions to end users, and support in the business process analysis and mapping. We need an IT member, someone who's going to be configuring the platform alongside us, making sure that obviously it reflects the country's needs. And we need registrars. We would like to work with end users to make sure that we understand the day-to-day challenges and we can effectively enable services that can be tested. So we'll kick things off with a remote workshop to brief the project team and key stakeholders on what the plan is, what the key milestones and requirements are. We'll then work with the business analyst and relevant stakeholders to understand the current business processes. Maybe they've already been mapped with some of our partners. If not, we'll do that together. We're going to need the inputs required for configuration. So the forms, the certificates, the reference data, that's all required basically to enable OpenCRVS to respond to the country needs. And then we'll work collectively to map out what are the future state business processes. Perhaps they're already defined. Maybe we'll have to develop these together because we're going to be testing these using OpenCRVS. This enables real life scenarios to be demonstrated in order to get real feedback and see the transformational potential of digital civil registration. We'll then configure the platform collectively with the in-country team. And then we're going to encourage countries to go out and test this with real users. What does it look like? What's the feedback? What are the additional requirements? There's a lot of features and functionalities in OpenCRVS, but the country might need additional things. Trying to understand that total cost of ownership is going to influence that investment case for scale. And ultimately, the output will be a configured and tested version of OpenCRVS that the country can demonstrate to stakeholders in country for buy-in, for investment in digitization, and it can be used to inform longer-term digitization investments. And of course, they're going to have the opportunity to showcase this at the ID for Africa AGM.
Exactly. And so basically, I'll repeat, this is an open call to the countries that are interested. You're going to be receiving a whole lot of technical assistance and accompaniment leading to the AGM. So take advantage of that, but please hurry up because we will close that call end of February and we'll select together with OpenCRVS using strategic and tactical criteria. We'll select 3 countries that will benefit from this grant. So please do not hesitate. This is one way for you to explore, experiment, understand the digitalization process, and benefit from being accompanied. There's another component, Anina, to the hackathon, which we should mention because that's also very important, but it concerns another sector of stakeholders, and that is the integration with ID systems. I mean, we've seen how important this is throughout this discussion. Here we want to invite interested ID solution providers and system integrators to reach out to us or OpenCRVS directly if they would like to participate. So I'm gonna leave it up to you to explain this further. But I understand, Anina, that OpenCRVS now supports MOSIP as well as OSIA interfaces. Could you explain this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a lot of work already integrating with MOSIP. And actually by the time, so release 1.3, which is coming in May, we'll have a level of production ready integration with MOSIP and also fulfill OSIA standards to make sure, obviously, that we're integrating with the digital public good for ID, but also any vendor solution who's complying with these types of standards. And the hackathon is so exciting, Joseph. And the reason for that is, we've spoken about it before, but the value of civil registration is enormous. And we haven't quite yet realized that value. But a functioning civil registration system should be and can be the beating heart of effective government service delivery. And so what we're asking system integrators and vendors to do is to be as creative as possible, to use and leverage life event data from OpenCRVS to demonstrate valuable use cases. This could be civil registration and social protection. We're looking at potentially working with OpenSPP and realizing those government to person payments, which are so critical to a government's economy. So the value of civil registration immediately coming to light. It might be with, well, we're already doing integration with MOSIP, but any other vendor solution that wants to prove and demonstrate these use cases. And these are also wonderful use cases for countries to be able to see, to gather, invest, backing for further investment in civil registration. We are underfunded. So let's make sure that we're realizing the value of this data through these integrations.
Yeah.
So how's that? Oh, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Daniela. Sorry.
No, it's also just a wee bit following on from the kind of overview of what this process might look like. Similar tight timescales. We're obviously really looking forward to Nairobi in May. We're going to hold a briefing session on the 1st of March, where any integrators or vendors who are interested in participating can join. We'll explain how it's going to technically work, what the interfaces are that are available. And then we will hold one-on-one sessions with each organization to make sure that they've got their unique identifiers to connect with OpenCRVS. And that's really important because obviously we operate under strict security protocols. We appreciate the emphasis that UNICEF made on security and yourself because it's critical to us. And ultimately, this is, like we said, it's about how creative can you be? What do countries want? Where's the value? Where's the investment? And how can we use life event data to bring those to life? And then at the AGM, we're going to meet together at the hackathon space. There'll be a whole bunch of work that's done in advance. And we're going to have an opportunity, organizations are going to have an opportunity to share what they've come up with and to get feedback and to really see which countries want to start testing this in real time. So that's the opportunity that we've got. Again, the application kind of process, you can reach out to ID for Africa and they'll connect you with us, or you can reach out directly to us at OpenCRVS.
Very good. I just want to close this segment by mentioning that something that I've already said before is that on day 3, there will be a 4-hour workshop co-chaired by UNICEF and OpenCRVS, to which we will invite representatives of the civil registration authorities throughout Africa. The workshop will explore the desirability and the feasibility of creating a shared asset for eCRVS. We have not fixed the form of that asset. We have not fixed its content. That is up to the workshop to decide. We gave this code name AXA, which means the African Civil Registration CRVS Shared Asset, the African CRVS Shared Asset. This workshop was in response to requests from several countries for convening such forum to discuss how could Africa standardize its full eCRVS practices and lower the barriers for countries to digitalize. We invite anyone who has assets or experience that they can contribute to this workshop to apply to participate. If the community ultimately feels it is desirable at the workshop, then one outcome of the workshop would be to create a governance body to steer the development of this AXA asset. Included in the 4-hour workshop is 1 hour break within which hackathon participants could demonstrate their work, as Anina was mentioning. We're hoping that you will take up this offer and that you reach out and you do participate in this opportunity. We will give you more information about all that at a later date, so stay tuned. In the meantime, please send us an email if you would like to participate as an identity authority or a civil registration authority in the hackathon, or if you are a system integrator and you would like to also participate in the other aspect of the hackathon. So let's stay in touch. Anina, we've run out of time. So I want to thank you once again for this wonderful explanation, for your participation. We look forward to seeing you in Nairobi and at the hackathon and at the workshop where you will co-chair with UNICEF. Thank you again.
Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you. Okay, so don't go away, anybody. We've got an exciting segment. This is segment 3, where the countries, 4 countries, the Gambia, Rwanda, Côte d'Ivoire, and Algeria, will be sharing insights and updates on their eCRVS efforts. Very quick updates. So to start, we will show a 3-minute video to pick you all up, excite you, show you something interesting from the Gambia. And then we will launch the session by welcoming the first participant, Ambassador Lamin Fati. Operator, launch the video, please.
For decades, electronic registration of births and deaths of Gambians and those living in the Gambia was virtually non-existent. Stockpiles of manual registration books dating back to time immemorial had existed for several years, making retrieving and processing of vital data a challenge. This is now set to change.
The systems all along had been ledger manual processed, and then we have challenges along the line. This includes data collation is 1, archiving the data is 2, retrieving the data from the database is also a problem. So if the people should get loss of their certificates, they find it difficult to retrieve the certificates. And also those registered in the provinces, you cannot have their data at the central level.
The Ministry of Health, with support from the World Bank, in its strive to digitize the civil registration and vital statistics systems in the country, embarked on a mass birth registration and health insurance membership registration across the country from August 1st, 2022 to December 2022.
An electronic CRVS system has multiple benefits for individuals and the society as a whole. It is the foundation for e-government and would allow several sectors to provide public health essential public health services which are effective and efficient. The birth certificate with the national identification number assigned to it would facilitate enrollment into the National Health Insurance Scheme.
Before the mass registration exercise was initiated, public sensitization campaigns were conducted to generate demand by engaging community leaders through various television and radio programs, community engagements, press briefings, and regular updates of activities.
We should all take part, we should all participate. I think it's good for every individual. You should not be left over. So the entire population of the Gambia should know that this is very important and it's good for the country and good for the people of the country.
We should actually come out in big numbers and queue and patiently wait for us to be called to go and then get our enrollment cards done. This is an opportunity for you to get yourself out of spending, direct spending on healthcare.
This campaign is for women. We are the one who is bearing children, and we are the one who used to take our kids to the hospitals, and the healthcare system is our duty, because even our husband, we take care of them. So I'm urging all of them to come out with full force with their family, encourage their family. Anything what women lead, it's going to be successful. So everybody.
Okay, operator, please bring Ambassador Fati. I understand. Yes, Ambassador Fati, are you able to connect? Yes. Raise or lower the camera so you will see you a little bit better. Excellent.
Yes, okay.
First of all, congratulations on the success of your project.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. I wanted to quickly comment on two important takeaways from the short video that we saw, and I'll ask you to react to each one of them. First, you have used health insurance to motivate people to come and digitalize their civil registration records. What was really the primary motivation? Was it universal health or completing CRVS coverage? Which is the chicken and the egg, sort of, which comes first?
Thank you very much, Dr. Atick. It is important for us to recognize that this is a holistic approach that we're using, but the essence is that to have a more focus on the CRVS. That is our ultimate objective, to ensure that we cover everybody. We're using it as a resource mobilization and also having maximum output, that the health sector is the one hosting the CRVS. That's the government opportunity that we have. Like other countries, they have CRVS in other ministries. But for us, births and deaths is under the Ministry of Health that runs this practice. So now, in order, we have an intention to also to come with the health insurance scheme in the country. Our platform is used as an opportunity to incorporate national health insurance so that the cost will be reduced on the state. Okay. And in time, also on the population will also be cut short, because the services will be the same. And once you have a one-stop shop, you're able to give a birth certificate, and also which will integrate on the national insurance scheme, as been alluded before. The national identity number the system creates will be the one used to identify people who will be using the national identity health insurance scheme.
I mean, do you think the fact that people were getting a benefit, which is they're getting a universal health coverage, played an important role in motivating them to come and register on the civil registration electronically?
One would say that, but our government context is that because we have not started that scheme yet, we are working on it. It has not been started, but we know that healthcare had been in the government virtually free of service, but also needs some corporations in order for it to be holistic, and then affordability can be there for the population. But the CRVS now, which is the key mandate of it, is the one we are advocating to say that the advocacy goes on the fact that the people need to be recognized, their identity need to be unclear. And also the government need to know its own population. And with this cannot be attained without the CRVS registering people, as has been alluded earlier.
Okay, but there is the expectation that there is a health insurance scheme that at some point will come. Isn't that the case? The public expects it now.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We also giving them the same message that the health insurance isn't, that one is even broader in another aspect, because even non-citizens, all residents in the Gambia will be included in that health insurance scheme, so that they will able to benefit. While CRVS is only meant those even non-Gambians born in the country are registered, and then Gambians born both in the country and outside are the one registered. So therefore, registration holistically will also cover more on the health insurance, because it gives room for those who are even non-citizens to be registered and be given health insurance cards once they stay in the country.
Okay, the second point that I saw from this video, it is impressive how much sensitization you had to do. So can you comment on the engagement with the public? How did you pass this through? Did you pass it through the civil society? Speak a little bit about the outreach and how important it was for you.
Thank you very much. The sensitization had been done a cross-cutting issue. We conducted synchronized broadcasting using all the televisions and then both the public and the private televisions in the country to deliver messages. We also use all radio stations in the country to be synchronized in the same approach. And the other segment of approach is that we use the local administrator, local governance to ensure that the district chiefs, the alcalos, million village heads are all informed in another way. We also use our another strata of communication, using caravan to go to the communities, engaging people, informing them that this is a vital event that is coming and it is one of they will come. So that with the assumption that assuring them that the service the government is providing is no cost to them, and we are bringing service that they will seek. If it is not there, they will go and seek them, and that will cost them anything, and will bring in the services to their doorsteps. So coupled with these ones and the commitment by all the stakeholders make us to reach all out of the in and out of the country to inform the public about the coming of the CRVS, and also Optic should be there.
Excellent. I just wanted to ask you about the approach taken and to update us on where you are in the process. I understand you've got 3 slides that summarize this.
Thank you very much. At the moment, almost we have registered almost virtual about half of the population had been registered within the 6 months that we started this campaign. That shows that the people have responded positively. And we are also having another approach to see a mock-up strategy where communities that we are not fortunate enough to be registered or inadequately registered, we come back to those communities and give them the services so that the Optic will be there, based on the factors that led to the poor coverage in some of those communities due to internet availability and also the time spent on those areas because of the density, and also we have not spent adequate time in those communities, so that we come back to those ones to make sure that everybody is covered.
Do you want to cover the approach, the technical approach that you've taken? I mean, operator, launch the slides for Ambassador.
Yeah, okay. That's we use the approach by using the platform that a commercial platform that we have done an advertisement across both national and international. And then Hera happens to be a company based in Netherlands, happen to be the winner of the bid. So we give them both local and international attention. And because of this one, we have our limitation as a country. We don't have much people or homegrown software developers to work on this area, so that it will be only government based. And also our knowledge on the software or open software is very limited. We try to use, that's why we said maybe OpenAI could be tricky for us as a stage at now. That's why we went for the commercial venture. The system is also linked to national identity because it can create identity numbers for applicants ranging from 0 to 17 years, and it can also incorporate existing need in the system, so that these are the ones that we put on the national health insurance cards. And then also the arrangement had been between us and then the immigration department, ensuring that when the 2 systems will be interoperable by sharing some of the information that we need. So that's why it is also linked to that internet, so that we're able to have the interoperability stage on it. And then the participation is that through immigration and the Ministry of Health working together to have a standardized and then approved system that will be also for in the near future, the 2 systems will be talking to each other more deeper. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. We have in order to operation to be very smooth, we have already conducted comprehensive assessment in the country in 2018 and developed a strategy plan. That's the way forward, because you can't have the idea about your country without comprehensive assessment. Some countries will do rapid assessment, but for us, we are fortunate enough to develop to do the comprehensive assessment in 2018. That has helped us to formulate a way out so that we can know what to do next. And that has helped us greatly. And along the way, we also developed standard operating procedures so that we were able to have a standardized operating mechanisms in the country, and everybody will have the same concept and understanding in terms of operations to make sure that the system is the way it will operate. And then the standard operation will indicate the documentation that are needed for one to be registered and how you can be registered and where you can be registered. So it gives the role of the community and the role of the service providers and also other technical issues that all need to be addressed within this one. In order to have another effective system in the country, it shouldn't be a standalone activity. That's why we were able to form a national steering committee, including all the stakeholders on board. And this we were able to bring on board the UN bodies, including World Bank, UNICEF, and other community organizations, were all, and along the way, that's at the national level. Then along the way, we also said at the regional level, which you know that where we have our service providers available, and there are authorities in those areas, we need to have regional committees which we have put in place. These are the ones so that they were able to know the day-to-day challenges of CRVS and able to address them. Things that cannot be addressed at the regional level will be referred to the central level where we'll sit. And in things that units may have an issue with, you bring it on board so that we share ideas and see how best we have a way out and a solution to that particular issue. For example, when we the committee when we started operating these ones, the census of the list of communities was not completed, but because of this one, we were able to assign a local government authority that responsible for regional administration to provide us a holistic name of communities in the whole country that has been used to develop a database for settlement in the country. And then in addition to that, again, the legal framework is also very vital, because in the Gambia, we were working on a system or legal framework that had been in place, but currently it will not address the current situations of the digitalization and other development issues that are coming in terms of legal, in terms of data privacy and protection, are all these ones. So therefore, there was need for us to do a consultative meeting, which was done together with the experts from all other areas to come and review the laws and then develop a system that have been highlighted in the assessment for that need to be done. So that has been done. So now we are at the final stages, because it has been sent to our judiciary so that they will do the legal drafting. Temporarily, the cabinet paper is already prepared. So once it comes from the legal draft stage, it will be sent to the national cabinet for it to be looked at the ministerial, at the administrative level on that one before it's sent to National Assembly for adoption. Then it will become into a law, inshallah. And that has been in place. Yeah, we also have what we said here, national health policy, that also highlighted that need for us to have this integration, and also CRVS should be a core center in terms of births and deaths that government need to give its attention, and the health workers or service providers need to give attention, and this is why it is integrated. The essence is that we don't want the CRVS to be a standalone project. So that's why the integration bit of it is that once we are doing services in the country, and it's a health sector, and then they are also providing these services, they should give equal attention to them like any other services that are provided within the Ministry of Health. Next slide, please.
Next and final. Yes.
That's the final. Okay. Yeah. We know the challenges we have. The internet is internet is a big problem. That's how we have to, based on that one, and also the cost as far as Gambia is concerned is very high. There are limited skills also among the service providers. These are some of the things. But how do we address these challenges? Because any challenges, we try to have a solution for it. We start to say that we need to train service providers, which is ongoing. We have already, before we start the training, the activity of this campaign, we've already trained them almost 1,500 data entry clerks that and IT officers that should be able to do. We've hired other skills so for them to be on board. The local IT also was trained on the operation and advancement of this. There's a plan to train them further so that they were able to sustain and maintain the system anyhow. And then we also use the multi-sectoral approach. We're aligning ourselves with the other ministries on CRVS, because now the government of the Gambia has also created a ministry that will be regional e-governance will be led by them. That is information and technology, and also a new ministry that is for public servants to be linked. The understanding is that now, how do you link people to our system? The understanding of the government is that we will be using CRVS which is creating a need for everybody to be enrolled in the civil sector, will be using that sector to enroll you instead of using other means of identifying a civil servants in the country. Along the way, the para-students will also be using the same system so that when they are recruiting anybody, the CRVS will be the core center in terms of service provision.
Excellent. Ambassador Fati, a lot of lessons, a lot of it from your experience that we can learn. And I'm hoping we can operationalize many of these things at the AGM during the workshop. So we ran out of time. We would love to engage further. So let me thank you, Ambassador Fati, and we look forward to seeing you at the AGM and later on in the year as we examine the linkage between health and CRVS and identity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody.
Impressive. Next, we have Rwanda that has been making huge progress in eCRVS, developing their own homegrown solution. In Rwanda, civil registration and national identity are under the same organization, NIDA. So the motivation and the approach that Rwanda has taken may be different than that the Gambia, since the context is different and the institutions are different. With us to talk about these points is Director General of NIDA, Josephine Mukesha, who's also our ambassador. So I'd like to welcome Ambassador Mukesha. Operator, could you please bring the ambassador to the stage? Welcome, Josephine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Atick.
Can you please give us sort of an update on your progress?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Give us an update on your approach, how you've taken, and just the very specific areas that would be of interest to our community.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to exchange. So what motivated us first to modernize our CRVS was to ensure a one-stop center principle. Because when we did an assessment, we found that the non-completeness and delay in registration were because events were happening in one place and registration were happening in another place. So we tried to combine both. So today, since 2020, we've digitized our CRVS for the registration of birth and death, but we've also digitized other events. So now we have all the 9 vital events, CRVS event as per the national law. Now they're all digitized end to end, and we issue the NIN at birth. It is given to the parent. The registration is free in Rwanda, but the certification is at a fee. So they receive a NIN upon registration in health facility, and in community, in case it happens, it's at a cell level, which is the closest to the community. And then when they get the fund, they can go on our online portal, Irembo, and they can download their record. So the approach we used to develop this system, we used a homegrown solution. The reasons we used were because we're looking at a system that will help first, will be remove the vendor lock-in kind of situation, because we started developing module by module. So it was, we first launched the 2 modules, then we launched 3 others, and then 2 others. So through those launches, because they were happening in a financial year, in different years, we were learning and fine-tuning even those that we had done before. So it allowed us to also learn what are the tools that we could use, and also the capacity of the teams to look into after the system after it is developed. So it was all that taking into account, and also the users, the end users. So we integrated with the existing platforms to reduce on the errors, and also the request of asking so many documents to the citizen. So we tried to do an all-in-one kind of system, but we also tried to look at how to make the service easy for the data inputters, because they had a lot of systems on their desktop where they needed to report. So we tried to bring in the stakeholders, all the data sets they wanted, and we collected them in one centralized system. That's why our CRVS is called NCI, because it's the national centralized and integrated, because we do not only take the CRVS dataset, we also take dataset for relevant stakeholders. For example, this year, we added the data point for children who are born with disabilities, because the National Council for People with interoperability requires the data set from birth. Yeah.
You have one more slide, right?
Yes, please.
Operator, advance the slide. Yes.
Yeah. So to achieve this, we looked at how to make it happen. We had to amend our laws because our laws only provided for the registration at the sector offices and at the embassies. So for it to happen at the point of service, to adhere to our motto of one-stop center principle, we had to amend our laws, and the law was amended. So now we have more than 3,224 points of services, which we have seen tremendously. We are getting our vital statistic report will be released very soon, and the results are really, really tremendous. 3 years down the line, we can see that we are really achieving the SDG targets. We are still struggling on the death registration part, but we are also looking at other mechanisms to ensure that it is done and completeness is achieved.
And so let's get into any set of recommendations you can make to other countries who are trying to digitalize their CR.
So it is mostly looking at the legal framework, because when we build a system and we embed the operating procedures and the laws into the processes, it reduces on the rejection or on the blocking to issue the certificate. For example, our law only provides for the registration of birth in maternity, but the recognition is done at the sector. So if a mother is not married, which is known from the ID card, at the maternity, they cannot add the father's name. That's a separate process that is done at the sector office. So by embedding that into the system, it allows the health facilities to do their job completely, but also to ensure that there's no gap of adding a data set that is not allowed by that person. The other one is to ensure that we are considering the local needs, technological needs, the speed of the system, the capacity of the users, because it varies. Having more than 3,000 users, some are very advanced, some are at a very entry stage. So knowing how to have a system that is intuitive enough to allow, but also to ensure that we do not compromise on the data quality. The other one, which is very, very important, is the stakeholder engagement, because CRVS touches on a human being. So stakeholders is literally everybody within the government and the private sector. So to ensure that we take their needs into consideration ensures success, and it should be designed to allow interoperability so that we can do data sharing afterwards, because it is one of the core systems that helps in digitizing and provisioning service delivery to citizens at a better quality. So having that in mind allows to build an end-to-end CRVS system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josephine. I've got a few things I want to talk to you about. Let me go back to the issue of what you said, lock-in, vendor lock-in. Fantastic that you've done your homegrown solution to avoid that. But I want to avoid misconceptions that some people may have. When you solve the problem of vendor lock-in and you do it yourself, you've arrived at a point where you've also did not lock yourself in a technology of your choice, which means tomorrow if something else comes in, which is better, since you understand your processes, you're not really locked in. What's important is not writing code and writing software, right? Yes. What's important is creating digital procedures.
Yes, and always having a system that accommodates the revision of procedures to make the service provision easier every day.
Exactly. So that's a very important message about digitalization. It's not about writing a piece of code or software. It is about understanding how a digital business process works, and you can put it in boxes, and then you can have somebody either give you those boxes or you can write the boxes themselves. But let's not confuse what it means. Homegrown to me is something much, much more than simply writing code.
Yes, definitely.
So
definitely.
you're in agreement in that, and I think it's important that those who are listening make that distinction. The other thing is the sustainability of financial support for this. Is this being supported from the NIDA budget, or this being supported from the health budget, not from the development and the business process strategy? The ongoing operations, who is going to be funding that aspect of it?
It will be supported by the NIDA. Our budget comes from the central government, so we get it from the central government. But the way we do the engagement with stakeholders does not only limit to them giving their input when they are doing. It also goes to when we are going for campaigns. Whoever has funds and is running a campaign, we can put in our aspect of the CRVS into that campaign so that it lowers our outreach budget, and we can use the stakeholders' budget to do it. And that can go even to the private sector. So that's how, because as you rightfully mentioned, just having a system is not, it's not the end of it. So it is, yes, we need to think beyond the citizen engagement, the education, which is actually the most costly part of it. So that's the one where we engage heavily with the stakeholders.
Excellent.
But on the system part and on the management, it's purely government funded.
Purely government funded. Okay. Yeah. Ambassador Mukesh, thank you so much. This is a bright side of progress that we're seeing today. And of course, I look forward to seeing you at the AGM and to hearing more about the wonderful work NIDA and yourself are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, for the next two countries, the speakers will speak in French, but the presentation decks will be in English, and we will be will have someone who will translate consecutively on the panel. No need to switch channels. Operator, please bring the interpreter, as well as the first. We will start with Côte d'Ivoire, that has its unique context and different motivation and approach. We're going to listen to DG Kodia. Operator, please bring, yes, DG Kodia, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. I know you can understand, you can speak English, but you will be speaking from your deck, about your deck in French. Please walk us through the motivation and the approach that you have taken to tackling the challenge of civil registration in the Côte d'Ivoire, and the progress that you've been making, the impressive progress that you've been making.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Merci à tout le monde. C'est un honneur pour nous d'être ici encore, de partager encore avec tout le monde. Et je pense que pour la question de civil, bon, je suis un peu mélangé entre l'anglais et puis le français parce qu'on a tout préparé en anglais. Mais en fait, aujourd'hui, en termes d'évolution pour l'état civil en Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons effectivement adopté la stratégie carrément de la digitalisation. Et donc, avec
DG Kodia, stop so that she can translate.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you very much for everyone. It's an honor to be here and to share all of this with you. And the question is, we have prepared everything in English, but I'll be then sharing in French. Regarding the evolution of civil registry in Ivory Coast in the state, and regarding the digitalization of the state tools.
Et donc aujourd'hui, avec un ensemble d'acteurs qui sont les acteurs nationaux, c'est-à-dire tous les ministères en charge donc de la santé, de la justice et du ministère de l'Intérieur, nous avons maintenant finalement opté pour une solution qui est en cours et qui est en train de se mettre en place.
So today we have assembled a set of actors from several ministries of health, justice, and Ministry of Interior to set up a solution.
Et donc cette solution, elle est partie du fait que en regardant depuis les anciennes statistiques, on se rend compte que le niveau d'enregistrement des naissances, même s'il est en train d'évoluer, mais il reste encore faible.
So for this solution, we started by looking at the old statistic and noticed that even though the level of civil registration of births have improved, it's still very low.
Bon, pour les décès, c'est encore beaucoup plus faible. Et donc, on se rend compte que le plus souvent, pratiquement près de 74, plus de 75% des Ivoiriens n'ont pas vraiment été enregistrés de façon correcte au moment de leur naissance.
And the rate of registration for death is even lower. We are at 75% of death, 68% of the death registration, and we have noticed that 75% of Ivorians have not been registered at birth.
Heureusement que nous sommes maintenant en une nette progression, mais encore pour l'instant, les enfants, en général les enfants, donc au point la moitié des enfants de moins de 5 ans ne sont toujours pas déclarés.
Sorry, this is the interpreter. I have to do an adjustment. So 75% had civil registration in 2016, and we are luckily improving the birth registration, but we have been noticing that half of the births are still not registered.
Et on pense que les statistiques ont montré que un enfant, en tout cas, c'est les zones, ceux qui sont en zone rurale sont beaucoup plus concernés par ce phénomène.
And the statistics show that children that are in the rural areas are even more touched by this phenomena.
Les causes de cela ont été clairement identifiées et il s'agit notamment des causes de facteurs économiques, de l'éloignement des centres par rapport au lieu de déclaration.
And the reasons for that have been clearly identified. One is an economic factor, and the other one is the distance from the urban centers and from the registration centers.
Donc, c'est ce qui nous a amené clairement à aller vers la digitalisation pour pouvoir rapprocher les centres des populations et faire en sorte que l'accès soit le plus facile pour les populations.
So the solution to that has been identified as being the digitalization of the tools and allowing the populations to get closer to the registration centers.
Et donc, avec ça, on permet aussi une meilleure conservation des données parce que les centres d'état civil, quand c'est du papier qu'on doit classer et on le voit, il faut conserver ces papiers et la consultation régulière des papiers altère les papiers, ça fait que le plus souvent, les registres disparaissent ou à cause de mauvaises conditions de conservation ou des incidents qui peuvent arriver, on perd complètement tous ces enregistrements qui ont été faits.
And with this, we have observed that it would be an improvement in the conservation of data to digitalize the data because the paper, the consultation of documents that are paper actually damage the paper, and the accidents would also make some of this paper registers disappear and losing the data of the registration.
Donc, alors, la digitalisation nous permet de réduire les coûts, rendre les services plus accessibles, meilleure conservation des données, et puis de faire en sorte que tout le monde puisse avoir accès à un document et que plus aucun enfant ne reste sans document, mais aussi d'avoir des données statistiques à jour le plus proche possible de la réalité.
The digitalization will then reduce the cost, improve the access of the documents, improve the conservation of the data, and also will offer an access to all, and will prevent children to be undocumented, and will also improve the statistics that will be more up to date.
Donc, aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce que nous utilisons? Nous utilisons un système intégré qui est intégré à un registre national de la population et qui a aussi son volet gestion de l'état civil.
So what we're doing today, we're integrating a national registration system, but which is also integrated to the civil registry of the country.
Donc, le système comprend une application mobile et puis une application qui est web, donc qui permet à l'opérateur de se connecter à travers l'Internet.
The system includes two applications, one mobile application and one web application, which allows the agent to connect through the Internet.
Il faut dire que le système d'état civil en Côte d'Ivoire, il ne gère pas seulement que les naissances et les décès, mais il gère l'ensemble des faits d'état civil conformément à la loi.
We have to note that the civil registry system in Ivory Coast doesn't include only births and deaths, but also all the events of vital events as the law indicates it.
Donc, vous avez en bas de la slide, vous avez les différents éléments qui sont qu'on peut avoir à travers le système, mais il faut noter 2 points et sinon 3 points essentiels. C'est que le système permet de donner déjà un numéro national d'identification et puis d'être interopérable avec les autres systèmes et puis de permettre de donner des documents électroniques.
At the slide at the bottom, we see all the elements that are integrated in the system, but we have to highlight 3 functionalities. The first is to provide a national ID number. Second is the interoperability of the systems. And third is to provide an electronic identification document to the user.
Et donc, on a, à travers ça, on peut maintenant connecter l'ensemble des autres systèmes qui produisent l'identité. Donc, l'identité est connectée à ce système. Et ensuite, on va pouvoir connecter à ça tous les systèmes d'identification en Côte d'Ivoire, du permis de conduire au passeport, à la couverture maladie, et à tous les systèmes vont pouvoir être interopérables à partir d'un seul NNI, pouvoir suivre un numéro national d'identification, suivre la personne de sa naissance jusqu'à plus tard après son décès.
So through this entire system, it is connected with all the elements or the parties of identification, which connects to the ID, and this connects all the partners from a driving license, passport, health system, and all this entire system is interoperable, so it can follow a user from its birth until after it is deceased.
Je vais demander aux opérateurs de nous présenter la petite vidéo qui montre un peu le cas concret avec les différents équipements qui sont utilisés.
I will ask the operator to show the little video that shows all the different equipment and how it is used.
Est-ce que l'enfant est né dans un centre de santé?
Et donc, ici, vous voyez que c'est une sage-femme. Okay, let me say in English for fathers. The nurse is taking all the data of the birth, for the birth registration, and is putting on the smartphone. And at this time, he can also have a direct connection for the ID system of the parents. So he can have it directly instead of taking it manually. Now you have all the data sent directly to the system, and the civil registration officer in his office have this screen and can validate and create directly the birth certificate. As you see now, the birth certificate operate directly. So, okay, on revient maintenant à la présentation.
Back to the presentation now.
C'est bon? OK, on revient. Donc, on voit maintenant ce système-là. Quelles sont les difficultés que nous avons, les challenges? Donc, on se rend compte que c'est un système qui doit être opéré à distance. Donc, il y a les questions de couverture de connectivité. Et donc, il faut qu'on puisse se connecter à un serveur. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train d'aller sur tous les centres pour les équiper tous de ce système.
So now we will see what are the challenges. One of the challenges is that the system has to be operated from a distance. So it needs to have to work through servers, and we are now reaching out to each center to make sure that they are connected to that.
En termes de mitigation, le gouvernement est en train de doter la Côte d'Ivoire de fibres optiques. Et donc, ces fibres-là seront dirigées aussi vers les centres d'état civil pour avoir une connexion permanente.
In terms of mitigation, the government is also providing optic fibers to make sure that the centers are constantly connected to the government system.
L'autre élément, c'est vraiment l'adhésion des populations en termes de sensibilisation pour que tout le monde puisse maintenant adopter le système digital de déclaration des naissances.
The other issue would be the adoption of the public and the awareness of the public in the adoption of this digital registration system.
Donc, pour ce défi-là, ce que nous faisons, ce sont des campagnes de sensibilisation à travers tous les acteurs religieux, communautaires, en tout cas tous ceux qui peuvent, qui ont une influence communautaire pour que cela puisse aider dans les campagnes de sensibilisation.
So to help with that, we are acting on awareness campaigns that are working with partners locally in the religious area and in the communities, or any actors of influence that could help with this awareness of the populations.
Surtout que pour ce système, nous avons maintenant, en fonction de la loi, l'implication des points de collecte communautaires, c'est-à-dire des agents qui vivent dans la communauté, mais qui seront aussi chargés les faits d'état civil à travers les smartphones.
So especially since we have now in the system collection points within the community that are representatives within the community who will be helping collecting the vital data through a smartphone.
Donc, si pour tout ça, on voit bien que les ressources, c'est un grand projet qui commence avec une situation de l'état civil qui est assez faible. Donc, pour ce grand projet, on a vraiment besoin de mobiliser des ressources. Pour l'instant, il y a vraiment que le gouvernement, avec un appui de l'Union européenne sur des questions de communication et de formation, mais on a vraiment besoin de mobiliser beaucoup plus de ressources pour faire un système pérenne.
So for all this, you can see that it is a very big project, especially since we started with a weak civil registry system. And for that, we need more resources. Some of the resources, only resources we got was from the European Union with resources in matters of communication and training. But now we need more resources to make the system sustainable.
Et donc, pour la continuité, ce que nous faisons actuellement, il faut un engagement politique. Donc, du tout, la volonté politique est clairement exprimée à travers la création de l'Office national de l'état civil et de l'identification.
So now for continuing with this project, we need several things, including political will, and this has been shown with the creation of the Office for National Identification Civil Registry.
Et donc, on va, deuxième élément, c'est de continuer les campagnes de sensibilisation et puis de faire en sorte que tout le monde puisse adopter ce nouveau mécanisme qui permet de sécuriser, de certifier et de rendre plus accessible la déclaration de naissance.
And a second is to continue with the awareness campaigns to make sure that everyone will be adopting this new mechanism of certification of the birth, but also to more accuracy and more access in the birth declarations.
Le bien fondé de cela, c'est que ça va permettre d'avoir des services électroniques, c'est-à-dire disposer de les dates de naissance de façon électronique. Ça va permettre aussi de rapprocher les centres d'enrôlement de déclaration des faits d'état civil dans la population, le plus proche possible de la population, et puis réduire les coûts parce que les gens n'auront plus à se déplacer, à dépenser beaucoup d'argent, à perdre du temps parce qu'ils sont économiquement faibles en plus pour aller déclarer les naissances.
Okay.
So the good foundation of this whole system is to provide e-services to the population, to bring enrollment closer to the populations and within the communities, and also to lower the cost, reducing the transportation costs and reducing the waste of money, especially for these populations that are the weaker economically.
Tout ce système mérite maintenant d'être soutenu pour mettre la durabilité, la pérennité de ce système. Je vous remercie. Et merci à l'interprète. Et puis, désolé pour les collègues anglophones, mais comme je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de collègues francophones qui sont en ligne, je voulais aussi qu'ils puissent aussi partager ça. Thank you very much, Dr. Atick, for accepting that I have to express myself in French, and I'm available.
Thank you, DG Kodia. We ran out of time, but we look forward to seeing you at the AGM and to continuing this conversation. So thank you. We're now ready for Algeria. Let us welcome Mr. Ali Larkem. Monsieur Larkem, bienvenue à ce panel. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. Je voudrais vous inviter à donner l'expérience de l'Algérie dans la numérisation de CRVS. Bienvenue, ambassadeur Larkem. Merci d'être parmi nous encore une fois aujourd'hui. Je voudrais vous inviter à donner l'expérience de l'Algérie dans la numérisation de CRVS. Le forum est à vous.
Merci. Merci, docteur. D'abord, je tiens à vous remercier de m'avoir donné cette opportunité pour partager l'expérience de mon pays dans le domaine de la numérisation de l'état civil. Je tiens également à saluer tous les participants à ce livecast et toute la communauté ID for Africa. Si vous permettez, je passerai rapidement à mon exposé que je vais articuler en 4 points. Donc, dans le premier point, je vais parler des motivations ayant déclenché le projet de numérisation de l'état civil. Je parlerai ensuite...
Thank you, Dr. Atick, for this opportunity to share regarding the Algerian Digital Civil Registry. And I salute all participants. I will develop 4 points in my presentation. The first one will be the motivations that have driven us to digitalize the civil registry.
Je parlerai ensuite de l'approche que nous avons adoptée pour mener le projet.
And then we will talk about the posture we'll have adopted to lead this project.
Et je vais présenter brièvement les principales réalisations des projets de numérisation de l'état civil et leur impact sur le citoyen et l'administration.
And then I will present the main projects that have been done to digitalize the civil registry and their impact on the population.
Et si le temps me permet, je terminerai par un point de situation sur notre processus vers l'identité numérique et nos perspectives en la matière.
And if time allows, I will make a point about our digital identity and our perspectives in that matter.
Pour la motivation du projet de digitalisation, donc le premier déclencheur de ce projet de dimension nationale est une forte ambition politique pour simplifier la vie et le quotidien des citoyens par le numérique.
The first ambition of this project was to simplify the life of the users in their daily life.
Donc, les pouvoirs publics ont inscrit la numérisation de l'état civil comme un projet prioritaire au vu du caractère de ces démarches qui touchent à la vie de tous les citoyens à partir de leur naissance jusqu'à leur décès.
So the government has made it a priority project to digitalize all the events of the life of the civilians from birth to when they're deceased.
Donc, le citoyen était au centre de la réflexion des projets de numérisation de l'état civil.
So the citizens were at the center of the project of digitalization of the civil registry.
Ces projets visent principalement le développement des solutions numériques pour rendre accessibles tous les services liés à l'état civil aux citoyens, là où ils se trouvent, et à moindre coût possible.
So the objective was to develop the e-solutions of e-services to make it more accessible wherever the user is and at a lower cost.
La motivation était également pour le gouvernement et les collectivités territoriales d'exploiter le numérique comme instrument incontournable pour
The motivation was also for the government and for the communities.
Pour améliorer les performances des services de l'état civil par l'automatisation des processus.
To improve the performances of civil registration services by automation of the processes.
Lutter contre la fraude documentaire et à l'identité.
To fight against the bureaucracy and the corruption in terms of identity.
Et bâtir un système permettant de produire des statistiques démographiques fiables et à jour.
To build a system that allows to provide statistic information that are up to date and are reliable.
Ce sont là en substance les motivations des projets de numérisation de l'état civil.
This is the substance of the project of digitalization of the public registry.
L'approche adoptée, si vous permettez, donc le ministère de l'Intérieur a adopté une démarche de développement en interne par ses compétences de toutes les solutions numériques liées à l'état civil et aux documents officiels.
So the approach taken is that the Ministry of Interior has adopted an internal development approach to digitalize all the internal documents.
Dans cette optique, une opération spéciale de recrutement de plus de 2500 informaticiens au profit des collectivités locales et la centrale a été effectuée avant le lancement du projet.
And in that objective, there was a special operation to recruit 2,500 technicians to help establish the system and launch the system to benefit the communities and the collectivity.
Pour ce qui est du financement, tous les projets étaient financés sur le budget de l'État et ceux des collectivités locales.
In terms of financing, all the project was state financed and financed with the local communities.
Des moyens financiers très conséquents ont été mobilisés pour mener cette opération.
Very important financial means have been operated to be able to continue with this operation.
Les principales raisons de cette approche sont d'abord éviter la dépendance dans un domaine régalien de l'État.
So the 5 main reasons for that, first was to avoid dependency and the sovereignty of the state in those matters.
Aussi, développer des applications spécifiques qui correspondent le mieux à notre contexte national.
Also develop specific applications that were better adapted to our national context.
Et assurer par la suite la maintenance évolutive et adaptative des logiciels d'une manière autonome.
And then ensure the evolutionary and adaptive maintenance of the solutions in an autonomous way.
Comme vous le savez, la maintenance d'un logiciel est plus complexe et plus coûteuse que son développement.
As you know, the maintenance of a software is more complex and more costly than its actual development.
Aussi, pour assurer l'interconnexion et l'interopérabilité avec les autres systèmes.
Also to ensure the interconnection and interoperability with the other systems.
Et enfin, pour préserver la sécurité de données de nos citoyens.
And last but not least, maintaining the data security of the data of our citizens.
Next slide, s'il vous plaît. Pour les principales réalisations des projets de numérisation de l'état civil et leur impact sur le citoyen et l'administration, d'abord, la réforme du cadre juridique et réglementaire national.
In terms of the main achievements of the digitalization of the civil registry and its impact, first we have the reform of the national legal and regulatory framework.
En parallèle de la réalisation technique du projet, l'Algérie a lancé une réforme du cadre juridique et réglementaire national relative à l'état civil.
In parallel to the technical realizations, Algeria has launched a reform of the legal system of civil registration.
Cette réforme visait son adaptation aux exigences et aux opportunités du numérique.
This adaptation was for the requirements and the modernization of the digital factors.
Cette réforme a consacré les processus numériques dans le traitement des faits d'état civil.
This reform integrated digital tools into the civil registry.
Deuxième réalisation, la mise en place d'un dispositif organisationnel approprié pour mener les projets de numérisation.
The second step was to set up an appropriate organizational mechanism for conducting the digitalization projects.
Dans ce cadre, je citerai principalement la création au niveau central d'une direction générale dédiée à la modernisation et la numérisation et une direction centrale des documents sécurisés.
And in this frame, we have created a general directory of modernization and digitalization, and also another general directory of protection of data.
Au niveau local, il y a eu la création de plus de 2200 antennes administratives de l'état civil, en plus de 1500 commis qui existaient dans l'organisation des collectivités locales.
And this has been done with the creation of more than 2,200 branches, in addition to the ones that were already pre-existing in the local communities for registrations.
L'objectif de ces créations, c'est de rapprocher les services de l'état civil à tous les citoyens dans le territoire national.
The objective of this creation is to bring it closer to the entire population in the entire country, the civil registration.
Troisième réalisation, la mise en place d'un réseau sécurisé de transmission des données reliant au site central, les wilayas, les daïras, les circonscriptions administratives et les communes, ainsi que leurs antennes administratives.
The other element has been the connection of the data center throughout the South Central and all the communities.
Aussi, création de 2 centres de personnalisation des titres et documents sécurisés, un site principal et un site backup.
And also the creation of 2 centers of personalization of the documents, one central and one more distant. Sorry, maybe excusez-moi, on peut peut-être répéter juste pour être plus exact. Les 2 centres de personnes.
Les 2 centres de personnalisation, un site central à Alger et un site backup au sud.
So one central center in Alger and one backup center in the south.
Et la création et l'équipement de 2387 sites d'enrôlement.
And the creation of 2,387 sites of enrollment.
Quatrième réalisation, la numérisation des 3 registres de l'état civil, naissance, mariage et décès, et la mise en place du registre national automatisé de l'état civil.
The fourth point is the digitalization of the 3 civil status registers, so the birth, marriage, and death, and as well as the digitalization of the National Civil Status Registry.
Ce registre électronique est consacré par la loi relative à l'état civil, la nouvelle loi relative à l'état civil promulguée en 2014.
This digital registry is putting in place the new electronic law of digitalization of data, the new law that was set up in 2014.
C'est une base de données qui centralise tous les faits d'état civil.
It's a database that is centralizing all the civil registry.
Une opération de numérisation et de saisie de la totalité des archives des 3 registres de l'état civil, naissance, mariage et décès. On n'a pas encore terminé, si vous permettez, le le slide de réalisation.
And we have had the opportunity of excusez-moi, je me suis un peu perdue. Vous avez parlé de la mise en place de l'immunisation.
Oui, la mise en place du registre national et automatisé de l'état civil.
And also the setup of the national registry automatized of the population.
Et pour la mise en place effective de ce registre, il y a eu une opération d'immunisation et de saisie de la totalité des archives des 3 registres de l'état civil.
And to be able to achieve that, there has been an operation to digitalize all the registries, the 3 registries of civil registries.
Dans ce cadre, plus de 106 millions d'actes d'état civil a été numérisé à ce jour.
In this frame, 106 million of acts have been digitalized up to today.
Ce système a offert la possibilité à tout citoyen algérien d'obtenir leur document d'état civil à partir de n'importe quelle commune ou antenne administrative.
This system has offered for any citizen to have been able to get a digital document of his civil events at any location.
5e réalisation, la mise en place du numéro d'identification nationale.
The fifth realization is the setup of the national identification number.
Le NIN est institué au mois de septembre 2010 par un décret exécutif.
It was established in September 2010 by an executive decree.
Donc, c'est un code de 18 chiffres attribué à chaque citoyen.
It's a code of 18 digits that's provided to each citizen.
Il est généré automatiquement à partir des données d'état civil.
It is generated automatically from civil status data.
Grâce au registre national automatisé de l'état civil, aujourd'hui, le NIN est attribué à chaque citoyen algérien.
Thanks to the automated registration system, the NIN is provided to every citizen in Algeria today.
Donc, il permet de déterminer avec certitude son identité officielle, légale.
It allows to determine the legal identity of each citizen.
6e réalisation, la modernisation des titres et documents sécurisés.
The 6th realization is the modernization of official credentials and documents.
L'Algérie a mené un important chantier de modernisation et de sécurisation de tous les documents officiels.
Algeria has embarked in a digitalization of all official documents.
En utilisant les dernières technologies en la matière.
Using the latest technologies in that area.
D'abord, le lancement du passeport biométrique électronique en 2012.
First, it was the launch of the biometric and electronic passports in 2012.
Oui, en 2016, lancement de la carte nationale d'identité biométrique et électronique.
And in 2016, the launch of the national ID card that was biometric and electronic.
En 2018, le permis de conduire électronique biométrique.
In 2018, the driving license that was biometric and electronic.
Ambassadeur Larkham,
oui.
il vous reste 5 minutes, désolé, 5 minutes.
Plus de 48 millions de titres et documents sécurisés ont été déjà délivrés.
More than 48 million digital documents have already been produced and provided.
Le NIN est porté sur tous les documents électroniques biométriques d'identité.
The objective is to digitalize all the documents of identification and identity.
S'il vous plaît, passez à la next slide. Je vais expliquer le 7e et le 8e réalisation.
I will now explain the 7th and the 8th realizations.
Ce schéma illustre le lien entre le registre national électronique de l'état civil, le NIN et le système de gestion de l'identité et de la délivrance des documents sécurisés.
This diagram is explaining the connection between the National Center for Civil Registry, the identity cards in the NIN, and how they are connected and how they're different.
Ces systèmes sont conçus et développés avec une approche globale et intégrée.
The systems are developed with a global approach and integrated.
Ils sont liés par le NIN qui assure l'interopérabilité entre ces systèmes.
They are connected by the NIN, which ensures the interoperability between all those systems.
Le système de gestion de la délivrance des documents officiels d'identité.
The system of delivery of the identity
repose fondamentalement sur le registre national automatisé de l'état civil.
It is strictly based on the National Civil Registry.
Donc, c'est la source unique des données de l'identité.
It's the unique source of identity data.
L'ensemble des sites d'enrôlement sont reliés via un réseau supervisé au registre national électronique de l'état civil.
And all the systems are connected to the National Registration, Civil Registration System.
Aussi, ces sites d'enrôlement sont reliés aussi à la base de données nationale des documents biométriques.
The enrollment sites are also connected to the National Database of Biometrics.
Cette architecture intégrée a permis la récupération automatique des données de l'état civil à partir du registre national électronique de l'état civil et par voie de conséquence, l'allègement des procédures par l'élimination de tous les documents d'état civil dans le dossier, si vous voulez, des dossiers pour l'obtention des documents biométriques.
This automatic recuperation of data from the civil registry has allowed the elimination of all civil registry documents when at the moment of establishment of the biometrics.
Une minute, ambassadeur Larkem, une minute.
Donc, les deux dernières réalisations, la plateforme numérique de demande des documents sécurisés via Internet et aussi la plateforme numérique des documents d'état civil aussi sur Internet. Donc, le citoyen peut si vous voulez, se faire délivrer tous les documents d'état civil à partir d'Internet.
And also the NIN platform included the creation of a secured platform online for requests of national civil registry documents, so the user can do that request online.
Donc, si vous permettez, bon, pour conclure, grâce à un cadre juridique et réglementaire adapté et un système national de gestion de l'identité numérisé, conçu et développé avec une approche globale et intégrée.
So as a conclusion, thanks to a legal frame and the management of digital identity, as well as a global and secured established system,
notre pays a réussi la mise en place d'un dispositif garantissant l'enregistrement universel de l'identité de la naissance jusqu'au décès.
Our country has allowed to guarantee the establishment of a digital registration process and which is following the user from birth to death.
L'enregistrement de l'identité numérique est offert à tous.
The registration is accessible to all.
Enfin, nous espérons que notre expérience inspire les autres pays africains qui n'ont pas encore numérisé le système d'état civil et le système de gestion de l'identité numérique.
And finally, we hope that our experience in digital civil registration will inspire other countries that haven't established their digital system yet.
Et je tiens à renouveler mes remerciements à Dr Atick de m'avoir donné cette occasion pour parler de l'expérience de mon pays. Et je reste disponible pour répondre à vos questions.
And I would like to renew my thanks to Dr. Atick for providing us the opportunity to share about the experience of our country, and I'm available for questions.
Merci beaucoup, Ambassadeur Larkem, pour votre rapport intéressant sur les progrès impressionnants que l'Algérie a réalisé dans son parcours de numérisation. Malheureusement, le temps est très tard, alors on va s'arrêter ici. On va reprendre cette discussion ultérieurement, peut-être à l'Assemblée générale. On a hâte de vous voir parmi nous là-bas.
Merci, docteur.
Thank you for this report on this impressive progress on digitalization. And we have to stop here, unfortunately, because we don't have time, but we will be glad to go back on these items at the general meeting.
Thank you. And thank you all for staying with us on what is turning to be the mother of all livecasts. If we judge it from its length, perhaps it's very appropriate without any puns intended. You've stayed with us long and you've stayed with us hard. And I think if the public has declared by speaking in the background, it means that we are done. I just want to remind you very quickly that next week we are opening registration for the AGM, and please act quickly. If you intend to attend the AGM, register immediately. Do not wait last minute. We cannot guarantee places. Also, because of the workshops, we will do the selection of the participants in March. If you're not registered by March, we won't be able to invite you to be one of the contributors in the workshop. So please register quickly. And of course, we stay tuned to our livecasts and other information channels, the newsletters, etc. The 22nd will also be a very important livecast with I on Sierra Leone, not to be forgotten. Anyway, I hope this episode has convinced you that ID for Africa is committed to bring together all the stakeholders around this topic of civil registration and the integration with identity, and to make sure that we make progress all working together. There were a lot of bright spots today. We've seen how the countries have taken matters into their own hands. We've seen the emergence of digital public goods in this domain. So things are happening. We've also started the episode with a declaration that 850 million people do not have ID instead of 1 billion. So we're making progress together. So stay with us on this journey. Until then, please be safe and stay in touch. Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, to all the speakers.